In order to ensure that every laboratory was cleaned up, the operatives would throw powerful grenades, rodent-repellent bombs, and other things into the laboratories to force the black mice out, and every single one of them would jump out. As the cleanup progressed, the black mice seemed to have sensed the threat from the base and escape. This was just what everyone wanted. If they could drive these mutated black mice out of the base and into the open space outside the base, then the armed spaceplanes in the air could use their high-energy weapons to clean them up on a large scale. This was because the base they had built with great difficulty must not be destroyed by high-energy weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Occasionally, a few caves could be seen inside the base. Those mutated black mice were attacking the base from underground. A lot of robots had been sent to scout the area and spray chemicals at the same time to force the mutated black mice out of the ground. After this battle, they believed that the underground construction of the base would advance one step further. After a period of time, the number of black mice inside the base had decreased by a lot. Everywhere the operation squad passed by was covered in gray powder. That was the mutated black mice that had been killed by bullets and turned into powder by the drugs. Silen's senses were very strong. He could sense the 3 mutated black mice behind the experiment table even without looking. The moment they popped their heads out, the bullets that came flying at them would blow off their heads directly. Perhaps it would be difficult for other operatives to see in such a dark environment, but not Silen. There were a few times when Silen had fired his gun before his squad members could even react, and the sound of the bullets hitting the black mice echoed with the gunshot. After he finished inspecting the abnormal life forms in this area, Chute smiled and said, "Done. Captain, this is already the edge of the base, isn't it?" A squad member asked. Although Chute was also the leader of this squad, the squad members were still used to calling him Captain. Almost there. We've already started cleaning up the high-energy weapons outside the base. The rest should be easier." Chute's tone was relatively relaxed. He looked at Silen, who was repairing the circuit board of an instrument, and said, "Silen is pretty good." "Yeah, we're all a little ashamed of ourselves," a squad member said with a smile. Silen didn't say anything and focused on the work at hand. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. According to his predictions, those black mice shouldn't just be like this. Chapter 38. Chute did not say anything about Silen's silence. Silen had not spoken much since the beginning of the operation. He just thought that the child was too quiet. Young people should be more lively and cheerful. "Silen, don't worry about that for now. Once we're done with those black mice, there will be specialists who will come and repair the base. We should head to the waste treatment plant on the other side. That's their nest." Chute looked at the time and said, "Wait, it's done." Silen turned on the instrument and inputted a series of commands. "What is this?" one of the squad members asked. The words on the instrument had been ground away by the black mice and could not be read clearly. "This should be an instrument that analyzes genes or something," another squad member said. "MN, this is a relatively high-end analyzer in the League of Stars right now." Silen took out a small syringe from his waist pocket and dripped it onto a notch on the instrument. Then, he pushed the notch into the bayonet and inputted a series of formulas on it again. "See, I told you to read more so that you'll know something about any instrument you come across in the future. Otherwise, people will call you illiterate. TCH, I'm a soldier. A soldier only needs to know how to fight. What do I need to be educated for?" The squad members laughed and chatted. However, Chute did not laugh. Silen's reaction gave him a bad feeling. He had heard from Huanil that Silen was a very talented person who worked in Seven Lights Research Division a long time ago. Now it would seem that this kid was truly talented. It took him less than 5 minutes to repair this instrument. His skills were very experienced. However, the blood that Silen dripped on the instrument should be the black mice's blood, right? When did he do it? How is it? Chute moved closer and asked. It was because he could not understand the profound things displayed on the screen at all. As expected, being uneducated was a terrible thing. However, just like his subordinates said, soldiers only needed to know how to fight. Their brain memory was limited, and their CPU could not keep up with too many things. Sillin did not answer Schute's question directly. Instead, he said, "Captain, do me a favor and collect the black mice's blood left in the lab. Try to make it as fresh as possible." Some of the spots were bloodstains left behind by the black mice when they were fighting or when they were injured by the laboratory's defense system. As long as they didn't come into contact with drugs, there wouldn't be too many changes. Sure. Chute took a small bag of tubes from Sillin. Each tube contained a sterile cotton swab. Who would have thought that this kid would even bring this thing with him when he was preparing his equipment on the warship? Before long, the 9 of them had gathered 28 blood samples. Sillin found a few solutions in the laboratory. After processing them, he put all 28 of them together and analyzed them at the same time. Looking at the series of data displayed on the screen, he sighed. "Wait for me. I'll go collect another sample. Hopefully I can find it." "Hey, what's that kid doing?" a team member complained. "I have a bad feeling about this," another person muttered. Sillin looked at a cave entrance, took a few photos, and then jumped into the cave. "Hey you!" The team member who had followed him over almost had his hair stand on end. That was a rat cave. They couldn't even stretch their fists and legs inside, much less raise their guns. If a black mouse suddenly jumped out from below, they would definitely be waiting for death. Although the vitality detector didn't detect anything, there were too many interference factors in this kind of experimental base. It was common for the detector to malfunction. It was pitch black inside the cave, and the people above could not see what Sillin was doing. Sillin took off his gloves and placed his hand directly on the cave wall. The virus carried by the black mice had no effect on him. When he touched the cave wall, Sillin's mind had already begun to rapidly analyze the information his fingers had come into contact with. The DNA analysis of the tiny hairs, dander, saliva, and other traces left on the cave wall was about the same as the data on the detector. His fingers moved along the cave wall and suddenly paused when they reached a certain spot. Sillin put on his gloves again, took out the cotton swab inside the small tube, and wiped it over that spot. At the same time, he used a carving knife to scrape off a layer there. Chute and the others finally let out a sigh of relief when they saw Sillin come out of the cave. This kid is really after the sample taken from the cave was analyzed on the detector and compared with the 20 or so samples from before, a series of data was displayed on the screen. "It's just as I expected." Sillin pointed at the data displayed on the screen and said to everyone, "This is the comparison between the sample I collected from the cave and the 20 or so samples you collected. Some of the data was deduced based on the analysis of genetic material. I won't say much else. In short, we've been tricked." Chute frowned. "Explanation. I'll only say one thing." Sillin pointed at a piece of data. "The strength of the red and white muscles of the black mice we hunted was at least 5 times weaker than the black mouse that dug the hole. In other words, the black mouse that dug the hole was much stronger than the black mice we encountered, be it in terms of speed or endurance. And this is just an incomplete analysis. The black mouse that dug the hole was a stronger type of black mouse." Chute asked. "Yes. Because the black mice we killed couldn't even scratch through the reinforced protective belt beneath the base. I've checked the holes, and the claw marks on the holes were very clean. They could even scratch through steel plates. If it were the black mice we encountered, they might not be able to dig through it even if we gave them a month. But how long has it been since the hole in the base was dug?" The squad members were silent. "Yes, how long has it been since the base was attacked?" "A few hours." "Where are the stronger black mice? The waste treatment plant?" "No, if my guess is correct, they're true elites, are right below the central area of the base." Chute was shocked. "How is that possible? Aren't they?" Chute originally wanted to say that these black mice couldn't dig through the underground protective layer of the central area, right? But Chute immediately realized that they might have been wrong from the start. It wasn't that they couldn't dig through. Since there were such strong black mice, no matter how sturdy the underground of the central area was, it wouldn't be able to hold out for long. What are they trying to do? A squad member couldn't help but ask. Revenge. They want revenge. Sillin looked in the direction of the central area. The core researchers of the base were there. The black mice that had been killed were only the vanguard of the black mice. The true elites had yet to show themselves. Sillin even suspected that the black mouse captured by the research base was purposely captured by the black mice's leader. That was because it wasn't an elite either. Compared to the one that dug the hole, it wasn't on the same level at all. The waste treatment plant used to be their nest because there was water and food there. But now, that place was nothing more than a cover for the operation team to continue wasting ammunition and time. They were very good at making a feint in the east and attacking in the west. In this world, there were far more intelligent races than people could imagine. Why didn't you say anything if you'd expected it? A squad member said angrily. Say, would you have believed me if I said it without evidence? With Sillin's status as a student, neither the military personnel nor the researchers of the base would believe him. Since that was the case, he might as well find evidence first. Sillin admitted that he wasn't a benevolent person. He wouldn't do something like being snubbed if he showed kindness to others. The lives and deaths of those people had nothing to do with him. If Mo Hing knew what Sillin was thinking, he would probably be so angry that he'd give him a good beating. Chapter 39. After listening to Sillin's words, Chute dialed the communicator and said a few words before passing it to Sillin. You can talk to Boss Hua. Sillin took the communicator and explained the current situation to Huanil. He also sent over a series of data analyzed by the apparatus. The evidence was convincing enough. Keep all the blood and other samples you've collected. I'll send someone over to collect them. I'll have the other teams collect more samples as well. Huanil also realized the severity of the situation after listening to Sillin's report and told Sillin some things that needed attention. Alright, I got it. We'll pay attention. Sillin suddenly paused while talking to Huanil. He swiftly turned around, raised his gun, and fired 2 consecutive shots. There was no hesitation or time to aim at all. Everything was done in one go. Bang! Bang! On the other side, Chute was still talking to his squad members. He had already realized the danger when Sillin raised his gun, but before he could react, Sillin's 2 bullets had flown over. The bullets swept past the tip of Chute's hair beside his ear. He could still feel the heat from the bomb flying past his face, as well as the burning smell of his hair left in the air by the bullet flying at high speed. It was a black mouse about 2 meters long, excluding its tail. When the first shot hit it, the bullet had only exploded in a small area on its body, and the drugs hadn't quickly permeated its entire body. Therefore, if the second bullet hadn't come right after, it still had the strength to rip Chute's back in half with a single swipe of its claws. The black mouse that had taken 2 bullets fell to the ground and twitched. Its blade-like claws left a few deep claw marks on the ground. It was obvious that they were much more resistant to the drugs in the bullets than the black mice before them. Before the blood had completely turned to powder, Sillin quickly took out a syringe and sucked a bit of the blood on the ground. He put it into a small tube filled with neutralizer and anticoagulant. Under everyone's shocked gazes, he even dug out a piece of the big black mouse's flesh and soaked it in the bag filled with neutralizer. The squad members felt a chill run down their back. They didn't know if it was because of the black mice or Sillin. Didn't this kid know how to do something that made people feel at ease? The black mouse was still twitching and hadn't stopped breathing, but this brat ran over to take its blood and dig out its flesh. Wasn't he afraid that the black mouse would strike again before it died? The black mouse's eyes, which were so red that they seemed to be filled with blood, gradually dimmed and turned black. Finally, it stopped breathing and slowly turned into powder. However, the sharp claws were still intact. "Thank you," Chute said after coming back to his senses. Although he had been talking to his team members, he was still on guard. No one had noticed the big black mouse's approach, and he himself only realized the danger when Scylla raised his gun. Although Chute's back was facing the black mouse, he could still sense that the black mouse was charging at him. It was several times faster than the black mice in front of it, and it was also silent. By the time you noticed it, it was already too late. Juanil's communicator was still on, and from the video settings on the communicator, Juanil had already seen the scene just now. There was no need for further proof. Juanil had truly witnessed the slightly stronger black mice Scylla spoke of. If all the black mice under the base were like this, then the consequences would truly be unimaginable. If it wasn't for Scylla's reminder, the hidden black mouse elites would have taken the opportunity to kill off the research center and the last two teams who went to rescue them while all of their personnel were encircling the mouse nest at the waste treatment plant. He picked up the undamaged black mouse's claw and slashed it across the lab table beside him. The hardened surface of the claw was easily cut open. "Holy shit, this thing is so powerful!" a team member exclaimed in surprise. This had completely exceeded their predictions. This big black mouse is probably here to patrol and see if the other teams have left. After all, the other teams should have left the base and were preparing to head to the waste treatment plant by now, but we're still here. Scylla voiced his speculation. Moreover, the fact that this black mouse could come over safely meant that it wasn't afraid of the rat poison sprayed in the underground tunnel at all. "I've already ordered 6 teams to return. I'll leave 2 teams and the weaponized spaceplane there. If they can't handle it, I'll just have the weaponized spaceplane flatten that area with its high-energy cannons." Right now, Juanil didn't have the heart to care about the waste treatment plant anymore. The moment he thought of Scylla's words, he became restless. On the other side, Juanil urgently stopped the 10th Squad, who was preparing to open the protective shield at the center of the base. At the same time, the engineers who were repairing power supplies and other important equipment under the 9th Squad's protection were hastily brought back to the spaceplane. The base was too dangerous. The samples and data Scylla had submitted were immediately processed. Then, Juanil gave every team leader a new order to send another machine into the underground tunnel to expand the size of the tunnel. Otherwise, the soldiers wouldn't even be able to move after they went down, and would only become food. But strangely, the deeper they went, the bigger the hole became. There was no need for machines to expand the hole at all. When the machines reached a certain depth, they were clawed and destroyed by the black mice below. But before the machines were destroyed, the detection devices on the machines showed that there were a large number of abnormal lifeforms below. This confirmed Scylla's speculation. However, another question was raised. Why were the holes below so big? Didn't this mean that there were even bigger black mice? There was no conclusion to this question for now. Maybe it was because they had realized something, but the black mice hiding deep below the base had begun to move earlier. Of the 8 squads, some went underground, and some stayed behind at various parts of the base. Because Juanil had told them to, every operative fired at least 2 shots at the black mice that crawled out of the hole. Other than the holes that had already been opened in the base, the group of big black mice had opened many more holes away from the operatives' firepower when they charged towards the surface. They were like a group of mad Avengers who didn't care about their own lives at all, and only charged towards the center of the base. Since these big black mice were very fast and had very sensitive senses, there was no doubt that the operative's hit rate had been lowered. Moreover, the operative had to change locations from time to time because there was no telling if a big black mouse would suddenly jump out of the ground if they stayed there. There were already a few people who had been dragged into the hole by the big black mice that had suddenly charged out. They didn't even have the time to scream. Scylla's squad went underground. The hole was very dark, but their masks were equipped with night vision devices. After all, there weren't as many jamming devices underground as there were inside the base. The cooperation between the squad members was very good, and there were no casualties for the time being. The firepower was more concentrated inside the underground hole. As they went deeper, the hole grew bigger, and 3 people could walk side by side now. At a fork, the group saw a pool of blood. It wasn't the black mice's, it was human blood. At the same time, they heard a weak cry for help. Chapter 40. There weren't many messy marks around the bloodstains, which meant that there hadn't been an intense battle, but it also meant that those people hadn't been able to put up much of a fight against the attack. Shoot gestured with his hand. Stay alert, cover, and move to the other side to rescue them. Scylla crouched down against the wall, took out a small box, and scraped a layer of soil off the wall. The squad members saw Scylla's actions, but didn't pay attention to him. They only looked around vigilantly. After all, Scylla had done this before, so everyone thought that Scylla was taking samples. In truth, what they didn't know was that Scylla's real goal wasn't to take samples, but to use this as a cover. He pulled his finger out of the glove at an angle that no one would notice, and touched the wall and the floor to analyze the minute traces. Even the most advanced equipment wasn't as convenient as the chip in Scylla's body. The moment he touched it, the feedback from his finger allowed Scylla to know what kind of black mice had attacked the operatives here. It was different. It was different from the big black mice that dug holes he had encountered before. It was stronger. Scylla wasn't sure how strong it was, but he had a feeling that those people had encountered the leader of these black mice, which was the mutated black mouse that had escaped from the base. When Shoot found the member who had called for help, he was already on the verge of death and had fallen into a deep coma. Under the illumination of the flashlight, everyone could clearly see that one of the member's legs had been bitten off, and his body was covered in blood. The medic in charge of the squad came over to help him stop the bleeding, but before he could finish bandaging the wound, he had already passed away. "I'm going to kill those bastards." One of the squad members' eyes were bloodshot, and he punched the wall in grief and indignation. The others had similar expressions. Shoot took a deep breath and said, "They're showing off. They could have gotten rid of everyone without a sound, but they just had to leave one heavily injured. He lost too much blood, and the rat poison has already invaded his internal organs." The medic picked up 2 empty tubes. "We've already injected the antiserum into both tubes, but it didn't have any effect. This rat poison is too strong. Captain, there's no signal on the communicator," one of the squad members suddenly shouted. Originally, he wanted to contact the reserve team and report the current situation at the same time, but he did not expect that there would be no signal at all. Every team brought a signal receiver with them when they entered the cave. Every time they reached a certain distance, they would install a receiver on the walls or ceiling of the cave as a disguise. The signal was quite strong just now, but now there was no signal at all. What had happened? Scylla thought to himself. Their intelligence, no, it should be said that their intelligence far exceeded people's expectations. If every team had done their job properly, and the signal receiver had been installed and concealed, but there was still no signal, then either the receiver had broken down on its own, or the black rat leader had dismantled the receiver. The former was unlikely, but the latter was very likely. It sounded incredible. Even if Scylla said it, not many people would believe it. How could a disguised signal receiver be removed? And to tear them all down so thoroughly? Was this a rat or a human? Scylla had never underestimated the black rat leader from the start. The more information he came into contact with, the more Scylla felt that this black rat was very powerful, be it in terms of intelligence or combat ability. Moreover, Scylla was gradually finding the frequency of that sound. Shoot thought for a moment, then took out his soundwave detector and pressed it. The reason why he had not used it earlier was because there was a high chance that the black rats would know their location when they used the soundwave detector. But now, Shoot couldn't care less. He kept feeling that something was wrong. Looking at the image displayed on the detector, Shoot's expression changed abruptly. "Get out of here quickly!" They had only taken a few steps when the walls and ceiling of the cave were drilled through, and the black rats rushed over one by one. These black rats had appeared in a very coincidental position, separating Scylla and another squad member from the other 8 people in the same squad. Due to the increasing number of black rats, even if Shoot wanted to rescue them, there was nothing he could do. The distance between the two parties was pushed further and further by the black rats. Gunshots rang out incessantly, but these large black rats were not as easy to deal with as the small black rats from before. They were very oppressive. Scylla and the other squad member quickly retreated to the other side of the cave, their guns never stopping. But fortunately, the number of black rats that had appeared was not too high. Scylla and the other squad member fought for more than 10 minutes, and no more black rats came after them. The 2 of them stayed in another cave. They had lost contact with the other 8 people in their squad, and they did not run into any members of the other squads either. Only the sound of their breathing could be heard in the quiet cave. "Looks like we're safe for now." The man smiled. "Yeah." Scylla smiled as well. An arrow of blood shot out from the side of the man's neck. The man's eyes were filled with disbelief. He really did not expect Scylla to act so quickly. How could a normal person be on guard against a teammate in a situation like this? When the man said, "We're safe for now," a normal person would let out a temporary sigh of relief and relax their tension, much less when their teammate was right beside them. However, the man's carotid artery was cut by Scylla just as he took out his knife. Due to the intense rat extermination exercise just now, his blood flowed quickly, and it did not take long for him to stop breathing due to excessive blood loss. Scylla played with the rat claw in his hand and looked at the man on the ground. He let out a few almost inaudible sounds from his mouth. This was the first time Scylla had used it after decoding the black rat leader's voice frequency. Scylla had been searching for that voice and decoding it ever since he entered this network of deep underground caves. Scylla did not linger any longer and left the place. In less than a minute, a couple of black rats would come over and eat that squad member. In a situation like this, Scylla would be able to deal with the few threats hidden in the operation team better if he was alone. Ever since he entered Seven Lights, Scylla had never overlooked these hidden dangers. Whether it was a student, a researcher, or a soldier, Scylla had never let his guard down. Aflon's opponents had actually extended their hands into the military. How interesting, as expected of Aflon's opponents. Scylla's performance was very eye-catching when the group had just come down from the armed spaceplane to kill the black rats, but no one would have thought that Scylla was also paying attention to the minute changes in every squad member. From these minute changes, Scylla was able to guess the hidden dangers. Scylla was able to confirm his suspicions through the series of events that followed. In truth, before the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people in the group, Scylla had purposely walked a little slower. That person was obviously looking for an opportunity to kill Scylla as well. The duo were at the back of the group, and Scylla had calculated where the black rats would appear. Scylla's speed and the distance between him and the 8 people in front of him were all within his calculations. It might seem like a coincidence that the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people, but it was all within Scylla's calculations. Scylla did not need a sound wave detector to detect the sound waves coming from the cave walls. A normal person would not be able to sense it at all. Scylla was like a multifunctional precision instrument that was analyzing the information around him at all times. He knew that the black rat's arrival was not a coincidence, but the result of the black rat leader's command. Like a human-shaped detector, Scylla knew everything that was going on around him like the back of his hand. How many people in the group had just passed through which cave, how many black rats were at which cave entrance nearby, and so on. He knew all of this, which allowed Scylla to avoid a lot of trouble. Looking at the buckle of his backpack, the corner of Scylla's mouth curled up slightly. The next one should be appearing soon. In front of him was a corner of a cave entrance. Sillen slowly walked over, and just as he was about to reach the turning point, the rat claw in his hand shot out like lightning. At the corner, a person wearing a combat suit had his throat pierced and was directly nailed to the cave wall. His eyes were also filled with disbelief, and the gun in his hand fell to the ground. This was originally meant to kill Sillen. The rat claw's trajectory was in an arc, not to mention that it was so accurate in an environment like this inside a cave. This was something that the person had not expected. Sillen pulled out the rat claw, and just like before, it let out a sound that was difficult for human ears to distinguish. In the following period of time, Sillen took care of 3 more people. There was a mini-tracking device at the buckle of Sillen's backpack. This was installed in the backpack before the equipment was distributed, and it was specially sent to Sillen. It was obvious that they had long since prepared to find an opportunity to kill Sillen here. However, they did not know that Sillen had already detected the tampering on the backpack when he received it. This was the so-called beat them at their own game. After walking in the network of caves for so long, Sillen could already clearly feel the number of black rats decreasing. Since Sillen had provided blood samples and related data in a timely manner, the operatives were able to make adequate preparations, reduce casualties, and improve efficiency. As Sillen walked, he suddenly stopped and turned around. In the darkness, on the other side of the cave, a large black rat nearly 3 meters tall stood there, its red eyes emitting a bloody glow in the darkness. "You've finally appeared. I thought you'd keep hiding from me." There was a hint of a smile in Sillen's tone. "That thing inside your body, I want it." Chapter 41. Sillen had always suspected that the black rat leader had something on its body that could cause it to undergo such a change. Mutation was one thing, but there would be a period of stability after the mutation. However, this black rat had undergone a second mutation not long after its first mutation, and it had mutated so successfully that its intelligence and combat power seemed to have been accumulated over hundreds of years. He had never heard of such a thing before. A rat that was still strong for hundreds of years, or a 1-year-old rat. Who was more intelligent? The answer was obvious. When Sillen was examining the traces left behind by the black mouse, he discovered that there was a strange substance inside its cells. In other words, there might be something inside the black mouse's body that stimulated the cells of every part of the black mouse's body to produce strengthening substances. It wasn't until this black rat appeared that Sillen could clearly feel the special information coming from its body. That information made the chip in Sillen's body very excited, as if it had found its own kind. The huge black rat leader had 2 pairs of incisors that looked like scythes, and it let out a hissing sound that didn't sound like that of a rat. It had sensed Sillen's presence before, but it didn't attack immediately. It felt that this human gave it a very special feeling, a faint sense of danger, but at the same time, there was a temptation like a delicious meal. Perhaps eating this human would be good for its evolution. After enduring for so long, it finally decided to make its move. The black rat disappeared from where it was, and the next moment, it appeared in front of Sillen. Sillen's reaction wasn't slow either. He had already put his gun and backpack aside, and he faced it with his bare hands. His solidified body collided with the black rat with a dull thud. The instant the black rat's claws swept past, Sillen quickly bounced up and kicked the black rat's neck. Bang! The black rat's neck didn't break, but its head and upper body were knocked to the side by the force of the kick. The stone wall where it was hit caved in, and crushed rock fragments fell to the ground. The rock wall was like tofu under the black rat's claws, and the hole expanded under the black rat's continuous attacks, and stone fragments flew everywhere. After so many encounters, Sillen already knew the location of that thing in the black rat's body. Whoosh! 2 rat claws swung towards Heishu's blood-red eyes. Heishu closed his eyes and slightly tilted his head. The 2 rat claws that were thrown by Sillen hit the corner of Heishu's eyes, but they didn't even leave a scratch on Heishu's skin. However, the rat's claw that was thrown out as a hidden weapon was only a cover. Silen's next target was its ear. The second black mouse closed its eyes. Silen swung his claws at the same time and aimed them at the left and right ears of the mouse. With such speed and strength, if it really shot into the ear, no matter how hard the earlobe was, the inner ear and nerves deep inside the ear canal would be damaged. The big black mouse also knew the consequences of being shot, so it closed its eyes and leaned to the side to avoid the first two mouse claws. At the same time, the black mouse raised its two front limbs and used its sharp claws to deflect the incoming hidden weapons. This was the moment. Silen jumped diagonally and flew under Heishu's front paws. His solidified arm pierced through its abdomen. At the same time, his arm sucked the thing out of Heishu's abdomen like a magnet. Then, he quickly jumped away. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. It was a white crystal ball the size of a fist. It was suffused with a dense white light in the darkness. Holding the white ball in his hand, Silen could clearly feel the enormous energy coming from it. However, now was not the time to study this white ball. Silen quickly retreated after obtaining the thing. Only an idiot would fight this big guy head-on. The wound on Heishu's abdomen caused by Silen's arm didn't bleed much. Instead, it immediately began to heal. However, the healing effect wasn't as good as when the white ball was around. The healing speed was slightly slower. Heishu went berserk after realizing that the white ball had been taken away for nothing. Its bloodshot eyes turned even redder as it roared angrily. Its two pairs of scythe-like incisors were suffused with extreme anger and killing intent. It didn't care about revenge. It didn't care about the lives of the other black mice. However, it couldn't lose this white ball. All of its reliance, all of its opportunities, all of it depended on this white ball. Heishu chased after Silen like a madman. With every step it took, its long and sharp claws would lift up a large chunk of the cave's stone stratum. Heishu didn't even turn. It simply chose the shortest distance to pursue Silen in a straight line. Its impatience was evident. Many parts of the cave had been destroyed. As Heishu and Silen ran, the path they took gradually began to collapse. The path Silen had chosen didn't have any other operatives. Moreover, Heishu had made a lot of noise, so the nearby operatives were on high alert. When they sensed that the cave was starting to become unstable, they quickly retreated to the surface. Silen had long since formed a clear and complete network of caves in his mind. He knew exactly when he should run to which fork in the road. The path he ran passed through most of the cave. Among them was the place where he had taken care of the hidden assassins. The cave's collapse had buried the last traces. The longer this dragged on, the weaker Heishu felt after leaving the white ball. It grew more and more restless. Unfortunately, the human who had taken its things was also very fast. While running, Heishu let out a long howl. It didn't sound like a rat, but more like those ancient beasts. This howl caused the entire underground network to shake. Even the operatives who were fighting the black mice on the surface could hear it clearly. It sounded like a long, mournful howl amidst the cold wind, or like the demonic voice of an Asura passing through hell. At this moment, all the operatives and researchers who heard this howl felt a cold shiver run down their spines. Just what kind of creature could make such a howl? Just what kind of situation and state of mind did this creature make such a hysterical howl? When this howl resounded, every black mouse on the surface, be it those who were fighting the operatives, those who were hiding somewhere in the base waiting for an opportunity to attack, or those who were about to drill through the last layer of defense at the center of the base, all stopped what they were doing and gathered underground. Even when the operatives fired their guns at them, they remained unmoved. Inform the operatives who haven't come up to the surface to evacuate the caves immediately. Everyone on the surface be on high alert. O'Neill roared into the communicator. Although he didn't know what was going on, judging from the voice, it was obvious that the leader was coming. Somewhere inside the underground cavern, a team of operatives was moving forward. They had lost contact with the surface earlier, and their communicators had no signal at all. But seeing that the cavern was growing more and more unstable, the team leader immediately decided to leave first. Otherwise, it would be a waste to be buried here. Especially after they heard that terrifying howl just now, it strengthened their decision to evacuate even more. "Team leader, there's a signal!" a team member cried out in joy. The closer they got to the surface and further away from the position of the Black Mouse leader, the more signal receivers they had installed earlier remained. It wasn't just this team. The operatives who were evacuating from the surface had also noticed that their communicators had a signal. "All underground operatives evacuate to the surface immediately. Evacuate to the surface immediately." Juanil's voice rang from the communicator. It was filled with urgency. "Retreat!" The team leader immediately gave the order. But before they could take 2 steps, they felt a tremor approaching them from afar. "Stay alert!" All the operatives raised their guns and got ready to fire. However, everyone knew that the number of black mice wasn't something the few of them could withstand with such a loud rumble. Retreat? It was useless. His cavern was very long, and retreating now would only waste their stamina and delay the collision. They hadn't encountered such a large number of black mice when they first entered the underground cavern. Now it looked like the black mice had gathered together and charged at them, and judging from the sound of their running, they didn't bother to conceal their movements at all. They weren't as stealthy as when they fought against them in the dark earlier. Surd was also a member of this team. Right now, he couldn't even be bothered to wipe the sweat off his forehead. He recalled everything he had experienced since he was young, his old dreams, and his ambitious arrival at Seven Lights. Did he regret it? He asked himself. He didn't know. He really didn't know. Right now there was nothing else in his mind except for the feeling he had when he saw the golden military emblem in his dad's study when he was young. Perhaps from that moment on, he had an obsession in his heart. One day he would get one for himself, and the name written on it wouldn't be his dad's, but his, Surd's. The black mice were already close, and the squad members could already smell the disgusting stench in the air. "For glory! For glory!" The squad members followed the team leader's cry and tightened their grip on their guns. Chapter 42. The squad leader had reported the situation and the names of the squad members to Juanil the moment he noticed the abnormality. Because everyone knew that Juanil was powerless to save them even if he wanted to. At the same time, similar situations were happening in other places as well. However, Surd's squad was the first to encounter the black mice returning from the surface. Juanil listened to his squad members breathing and growing louder through the communicator with an unusually heavy heart. At this moment, these people were still alive and they could still hear their breathing. What about the next moment? The squad members around Juanil were all red-eyed, but they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't make it in time. Underground, the squad members could already see the black mice appearing at the other end of the tunnel through their night vision goggles. Ready to before the squad leader could finish the word fire, a voice suddenly rang from the communicator. Squad members who encounter a large group of black mice returning from the surface, do not fire if you want to live. Move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. Be careful, do not fire. Sillin. It was Sillin. The black mice were getting closer and closer, but the squad leader hesitated. Listen to him. Do not fire, move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. On the surface, Knight snatched the communicator from Juanil's hand and roared. The squad leader gritted his teeth. Do it. When the squad members stood close to the cave wall, the black mice were already 3 meters in front of them. They had been this close to the black mice before, but that was with weapons in their hands, not like this. When the first black mouse passed in front of them, their hearts almost jumped into their throat. The front teeth, sharp claws, blood-red eyes, and the surging stench caused the squad members' scalps to go numb. They were even prepared to die. However, the black mouse seemed to not see them at all. It was still as fast as before and swept past them with a whoosh. Then another, and another, and another. Serd felt the chilling sensation of the black mice's tough black fur brushing past him. He couldn't tell how shocked he was. This was a black mouse, a real big black mouse, a mutated black mouse that 2 shots might not even be able to kill. They could still feel the murderous aura from their bodies, but holy shit, they passed just like that. They really passed just like that. He didn't even glance at them. This was definitely the strangest and most frightening thing they had ever experienced in their lives. Only Scylla knew that the meaning of the black mice's leader's howl was for all the black mice to stop what they were doing, ignore everything else, and surround Scylla with all their might. As long as they had that white ball, they would have a chance to make a comeback. On the other side of the communicator, on the ground, Juanil and the surrounding team members held their breaths as they listened to the sound of the black mice running past them. The image was on, and although the image on the other side could not be seen clearly in the darkness, the red eyes were still relatively obvious. Just looking at the communicator caused their adrenaline levels to increase and chills to run down their spines. One could imagine the feelings of those who had brushed past the black mice on the other side. After the black mice ran over, the sound of tremors also faded away. Knight heaved a sigh of relief. As expected, Scylla was no ordinary person. However, when he tried to contact Scylla again, he discovered that he couldn't reach him. With this group's example, the other groups who encountered the same situation also did the same. However, it was only when they really did it that they realized just how much courage it took. The cowardly ones would have fainted a long time ago. Inside the cave, the group's backs were almost completely drenched. They were still stuck to the wall and their bodies were still stiff. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. When they came back to their senses, the group members felt a little strange amidst the joy of surviving a disaster. The impassioned and heroic atmosphere in front of them was instantly destroyed. It was like preparing to go to the toilet for a long time only to let out a fart, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. How complicated their mood was, how complicated. Thank goodness that kid reminded them in time. Otherwise, the group members couldn't help but shudder just thinking about it. However, if they knew that Scylla was the culprit behind the black mice's reintroduction, they would definitely snap Scylla's neck in anger. Scylla, who continued to run, did some calculations and felt that the time was almost right. He put the white ball into Jenya's ring. It might be unstable for other subspace items, but Scylla had tested it earlier and found that it was pretty stable. As expected of an item from the mysterious Fuji family of the upper tree. After putting the white ball into the ring, Scylla sprayed some medicine he had prepared on his body to remove the ointment he had deliberately smeared on his body that was hard for humans to detect. As a hunter, Scylla had done plenty of things like using scent to mislead his prey. Scylla left the big black mouse some distance behind. If the big black mouse could speak, it would definitely say, "What the F*** CK, running away so fast? Who's the mouse here? This thing isn't human. This thing really isn't human." When the black mouse head followed the scent, what it saw was a cat's face painted with fluorescent liquid on the cave wall. It was smiling like a heartless cat, and there was a big meow character next to it. The scent disappeared as it moved forward. Scylla didn't know if the big black mouse could recognize the word meow, but it was obvious that it was fuming with anger. It was fine as long as it could add fuel to the fire. If it couldn't find Scylla who had stolen the white ball, and with this cat face adding fuel to the fire, what would happen to the black mouse head in the end? The big black mouse had long since kicked the matter of taking revenge on the base's researchers to the other side of the universe. Right now, it only wanted to find that detestable human, take back the white ball, tear that human into pieces, and then stomp him into mud. The operatives in the underground cave had all retreated to the surface. What would the black mouse head do when it was so angry that it couldn't find a target to vent its anger on? It would charge out of the ground. What was there on the ground? The operatives had concentrated their firepower, and there were even armed spaceplanes in the air. Adhering to the rule of capture the leader first, the big black mouse would become a common target the moment it went up. Moreover, without the white ball's support, the big black mouse's physical strength was declining, and its body's defense had dropped by a lot. Even if its attack power was still strong, it was obviously not as threatening as before. Scylla believed that Juanil could handle it. Scylla slipped to the surface through another route, avoiding the black mouse hordes that the black mouse head had summoned along the way. When he was about to reach the surface, Scylla sensed that there was a group of people nearby, so he ran in front of them through another route. He used the mouse claws he had collected to cut open his combat uniform, leaving behind many wounds. He controlled the color, viscosity, and degree of coagulation of the blood stains, making it look like he had been injured for a while. 2 vials of antiserum had been injected, and Scylla had forced his face to turn a little pale. He looked like a wounded person who had lost too much blood and was excessively exhausted. The communicator had been destroyed after the last call, so that no one could detect Scylla's position through the communicator's signal reception. After finishing his preparations and inspecting his body once more, Scylla lay down peacefully and waited for the group of people who had passed by. The development of the situation was pretty much the same as Scylla had predicted. The group of people had treated Scylla as a wounded person, and even helped him back to the surface. Juanil was relieved after he saw that Scylla was only injured and not in any life-threatening danger. Otherwise, how was he going to explain things to Sir Mo when he returned? Scylla told Juanil his guess, and Juanil immediately ordered everyone to get ready after he was done. They were waiting for the black mice underground to surface. At the same time, Juanil thought, as expected of Sir Mo's favorite student, every prediction is accurate. Chapter 43. Juanil had specially arranged a single room for Scylla. Not long after Scylla was sent to the medical room on the spaceplane, the sounds of intense fighting and the rumble of heavy weapons resounded from below. It would seem that the big black mouse had gone mad. Judging from the sound and the distribution of firepower, the black mice were no longer attacking in an organized manner like before. The leader's confused thinking had seriously affected their movements. "Yo, it looks like the final battle has begun," a medic who was treating Scylla's wounds said. Their tone had relaxed a little when they heard their colleagues say that the crisis was almost over. The medical reinforcement ship had already arrived at the space station outside the planet, and some emergency medicine had been sent over as well. By the time the situation here was more or less settled, the remaining medics on the ship would probably be sent over to help. "Yeah, Chief Hua has this victory in his grasp," a medic who had delivered the medicine said. The medic looked at Scylla, who was lying on the bed, and asked, "Are you a student too?" Scylla nodded. The medic made a strong gesture. "I heard from my comrades that all of you are pretty good. However, that academy called Hard is a bit of a pity." "Hard? What happened to him?" Scylla was shocked. Indeed, he hadn't heard anything about Hard until now. "He's in the ICU. I heard that he suffered a few claws while trying to save his teammate. He also sustained a few more injuries in the later battles. The antiserum he injected didn't work, and the rat poison had already seeped into his internal organs. I heard that he won't last much longer," the medic said regretfully. He was just a student in his teens. To them, he was just a child. It was truly commendable that he could participate in this battle bravely and not abandon his comrades under such circumstances. Scylla jumped off the bed. "Which room is he in?" "The third emergency room from the right upstairs at the corner." "Sigh, your wounds haven't, I won't die." Scylla ignored the medical staff beside him and walked out of the ward to go upstairs. Walking upstairs without looking at the room number, Scylla saw a few soldiers with bandages standing at the door. They were probably Hard's team members. There was also a person squatting with his back against the wall, holding his head and crying hoarsely. That was Serd. At this moment, the door of the intensive care unit opened. The doctor walked out and rubbed his forehead tiredly. I'm sorry, it's still not working. The serums we've injected are all useless. He was very strong and his obsession was very deep. It was already very good that he had been able to last until now. You guys, go take a look at him. He can hold on for 5 more minutes at most. Serd and a few of his team members practically rushed in. When they saw Hard, whose entire body was starting to turn black and fester, they rubbed their eyes, took a deep breath, and walked to Hard's side. Hud was wearing an oxygen mask, and it was obvious that he was having difficulty breathing. His eyes were so swollen that his original outline could not be seen clearly. Through the gaps of his slightly opened eyelids, Hud could vaguely see a few people beside him. Now, not only was his vision severely blurred, even his hearing was greatly reduced. But he knew who these people were. He knew who they were just by looking at the blurry figures. Hud could not make a sound, and Scylla could only know what Hud was saying by the shape of his mouth. I don't want to die, it's okay, you won't die. Didn't you say that you want to be a general? When the time comes, you'll go back and look down on those B***stards who made sarcastic remarks. Serd's voice was trembling, and he was almost roaring. The tears at the corner of Hud's eyes were bloodshot when they fell, and they dripped onto the white pillow. He knew very well what was waiting for him. There was not much time left, but he really wanted to go back now. Even if it was to communicate with his family, it would be fine. But the distance was too far, and by the time the communication signal was transferred, it would already be too late. Looking at the gaze in Hud's eyes, Scylla knew that even at this moment, Hud still did not regret it. He did not want to die, but he did not regret it. Dias had once said, in the army on the battlefield, the general was responsible for commanding, and the soldiers were responsible for dying. But soldiers had their glory, and they had their belief. They would die without regrets. Raising his hand, Scylla placed his finger on Hud's hand. It looked like he was giving his comrade one last encouragement, but in fact, Scylla was analyzing the toxins in Hud's body, and then synthesizing specific antibodies based on these toxins. He secreted the specific antibodies from his fingertips, and they seeped under Hud's skin through his pores, and through his blood circulation or other means, they were transmitted to various parts of Hud's body. Serd, who had been trying hard to decipher what Hud was trying to express, saw that Hud's eyes had suddenly closed tightly, and his lips were no longer moving. Instantly, his tears flowed out. Scylla used his hand to poke Serd, who was immersed in grief and wiping his tears. He's just asleep. Look at the heartbeat shown on the device. Serd. It seemed like he really had fallen asleep. 5 minutes later, the heartbeat was still there. 10 minutes later, it seemed like it was beating even stronger than before. After Scylla was certain that Hud's life was not in danger, he patted Serd's shoulder and said, "Call the healer over. Hud's vitality is probably too tenacious that even Azrael wouldn't take him in." Serd was still a little absent-minded. He called the healer over according to Scylla's words. Looking at the medics who were clicking their tongues in wonder, Scylla shook his head and left. But Scylla did not return to the sick room. Instead, he went to the temporary analysis room. There were some researchers who were busy working there. Some of them had escaped from the base earlier, and some of them had come with the medical ship as support. But until now they had only managed to analyze a dozen or so toxins and antibodies. Many of the soldiers who were scratched and infected by the black mice were still waiting for the unknown antiserum that could detoxify them. Scylla sighed. He had really overestimated them. Right now, he really did feel the same disappointment he felt when he looked at the other researchers in Seven Lights Institute of Mechanical Engineering. "Hey, who are you? Hurry up and leave. This is not a place for you warriors. You have absolutely no regard for discipline and don't know what's good for you. Don't interfere with our work." Scylla ignored whatever these people were saying and walked straight to a molecular synthesis analyzer. He grabbed the researcher sitting there by the collar and pulled him away. The man raised his eyebrows and was about to say something, but Sillin did not even look at him. Instead, he took out a handgun and aimed it at the man's mouth. The moment they saw Sillin take out his gun, the surroundings immediately quieted down. The few people near the door ran out to call for the soldiers. Sitting down in front of the instrument, Sillin swept a glance at the case on the operation panel and then stopped looking at it. His eyes were glued to the screen, and he withdrew his gun to free his hands. His fingers pressed on the operation panel, and the buttons he pressed were absolutely accurate, as if he was very familiar with the instrument. His hand speed grew faster and faster, and he looked incomparably practiced. Not only that, the researchers in the room realized that the instruments in front of them had begun to operate on their own, and the analyzed data was automatically transmitted to Sillin's instrument. In such a short amount of time, this bastard had actually taken control of every instrument in the analysis room. A few researchers began to criticize Sillin for his nonsense. But gradually, all the researchers in the analysis room fell silent. Molecular formulae were taking shape on the screen of Sillin's instrument, and the data displayed beside the rotating molecules was enough for everyone to understand that they did not have the right to make a sound right now. 1, 2, 3. They had no idea how Sillin did it at all. All they could see was the molecular diagrams of almost 100 antibodies displayed on the screen. Chapter 44. Analyzing and determining a correct antibody required more than 5 people to work at the same time, and it would take at least 3 hours. How long had it been since Sillin entered the room? Less than 30 minutes. This guy had used less than 30 minutes, and it was more than 7 times more than the 50 people in the analysis room combined for more than half a day. What kind of concept was this? How many things could a person's brain process at the same time? What was the limit? The researchers did not know, because all the answers they knew were rejected by the young man in front of them. Just the images on the screen that changed so quickly was enough to make them dizzy. One man, one pair of hands, controlling more than 30 instruments in the analysis room, analyzing and verifying data at the same time. Through multiple parameter calculations and probability analysis, he had obtained 100 antibodies in less than 30 minutes. Sillin ignored the stupefied researchers. He transferred the conclusion he obtained to the synthesizer and inputted the parameters. He separated the antibodies obtained from the synthesizer and labeled the type and dosage. The researchers who ran out earlier and the soldiers who were called over stood quietly at the door and watched Sillin busy himself in front of the synthesizer. Sillin turned his head and glanced at them. "What are you still standing there for? Take these synthesized antibodies and use them first. If one doesn't work, try another one. Try them one by one. There's bound to be something that works. The antibodies can be stacked." The soldiers who came over reacted a little faster. After all, the injured and needy person was their comrade. He placed the synthesized antibodies into boxes according to their labels, saluted Sillin, and then quickly left the place. Sillin let out a long sigh when the antibodies were all synthesized. He had spent a lot of energy in this 1 hour. Not only did he have to process the data from more than 30 instruments at the same time, he also had to add in some of the parameters he obtained from the underground cave. There was no doubt that the computational load had increased. To be on the safe side, Sillin added a couple of antibodies that were related to the big black mouse's poison. At the same time, he also modified a dozen or so antibodies so that their side effects would be even smaller. O'Neill, who was commanding the battle against the black mice on the outside, listened to the report from the communicator and smiled. He shouted at Knight, who was firing 2 guns not far away, "That friend of yours is a fucking genius. He finished the work of 50 researchers alone. He synthesized more than 100 antibodies. Of course, don't you know whose friend he is?" Both of them felt much more at ease. An hour ago, Pride was clawed and sent to the intensive care unit. Originally, he was worried about whether he had the corresponding antibodies, but now there were more than 100 antibodies. Walking out of the analysis room, Sillin returned to the ward, and the medical staff treated his wounds again. Have a good sleep. You'll recover faster that way. Yes, I'll sleep. Sillin smiled, but the medical staff did not notice the meaningful look in Sillin's eyes. The medics had just left when Sillin's communicator rang. It was something Huanil had specially prepared for Sillin on the spaceplane when he was injured. After the call connected, Knight's face appeared on the screen. Yo, your complexion looks good. You don't look like a heavily injured person. He wasn't seriously injured in the first place. He just looked scary, Sillin said. It was still very noisy on Knight's side. The sound of gunfire was incessant. Hee, Sillin, I'm telling you, that big black mouse has been eliminated. You definitely won't be able to imagine how he was eliminated. Knight's face was wrinkled with joy. After hearing that the rat poison in Pride's body had been removed, Knight's heart was very relaxed right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken this opportunity to share the embarrassing news of the battlefield with Sillin. He had wanted to call Pride's communicator as well, but that kid had fallen asleep after injecting himself with the medicine. Tell me. Sillin also wanted to know how useless that big black mouse was. I don't know what went wrong with that big guy. It didn't even look at the road and just charged around. In the end, it crashed into a 200-square-meter liquid nitrogen warehouse in the base. Haha, Sillin could imagine the situation at the time without Knight's explanation. The cold lethality caused by a 200-square-meter liquid nitrogen warehouse was absolutely shocking. Coupled with the big black mouse's rampaging speed, the power of the cold explosion was not something the big black mouse could withstand in its current state. If it had been the big black mouse with the white ball in its body before, the liquid nitrogen would not have caused much harm to it. It was injured one moment, but it would recover in the next. This further proved that the white ball was special. Sillin rubbed the green pattern on his finger. No one could tell what he was thinking. The big black mouse was suffering from the cold damage caused by the liquid nitrogen warehouse, and then it was attacked by the operation team's firepower. One could imagine its ending. Knight described the situation vividly. After all, almost everyone on the battlefield was cleaning up the last loose ends, so there wasn't much to do. I even took the opportunity to snatch some souvenirs, the big black mouse's claws and front teeth. I didn't get them if I was slow. Knight was very smug. You can be smug all you want. Right, don't hang up yet. Let me show you the beautiful nurse, Sillin said after looking at the monitor next to him. The monitor was showing the scene outside the door. A beautiful nurse with a graceful appearance was standing at the door with a medicine tray and pressing the doorbell. When Sillin answered the call just now, he had set the door to anti-disturbance mode, so he had to press the doorbell to let the person inside open it if he wanted to come in. Sillin placed the communicator at the corner of the bedside table. It looked like he had cut off the connection, but in reality it was just that he could not hear or see the other side, but the person on the other side could hear and see the scene on this side. He also covered it with a book as a cover, so it would not be discovered. Knight looked at the image of the beautiful nurse coming in with the medicine tray on the communicator, and his smile was especially sinister and wretched. Her figure was really good. With such a beautiful nurse taking care of him, that guy Sillin was in luck. The nurse smiled warmly and said softly, "It's time to change the bandages." "Thank you." The nurse simply pursed her lips and smiled at Sillin's gaze that was lingering on her voluptuous chest. She skillfully replaced the infusion bag with a new one before reaching out a fair and smooth finger to poke Sillin's forehead. Little pervert. Sillin was not embarrassed at all. He giggled and said, "That's because I'm facing a beautiful woman." After the beautiful nurse had left, Sillin turned on the communicator. "How is it? Not bad, right?" "Stunner, appraisal complete," Knight said with a wink. "Why don't you mutilate yourself a bit and enjoy the service of a beautiful woman? TSK, go enjoy it yourself. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to clean up the battlefield. After I'm done with the last few black mice, I'll tell you guys about today's great showdown when we get back. I heard that you thoroughly despised those arrogant researchers today, kid. Well done. Forget it. Hurry up and clean up the mess and get yourself a few more rat claws. We can sell them for a high price when we get back to Seven Light. Makes sense. I'm going to grab a big bag first. After ending the communication, Silen's smile faded away. His eyes were cold as he stared at the infusion bag he had just changed. A killer could not hide the cold stench of blood even if they had changed their skin. However, he did not need to do it himself this time. Someone would naturally investigate this. Chapter 45. Since the battle was nearing its end, the remaining medical personnel in the space station ships had been sent to the planet. The research base's protective shield had finally been opened as well, so a few nurses were assigned to every spaceplane to take care of the wounded and sick. A nurse on patrol opened the door to Silen's ward and prepared to record the patient's body examination data. The data displayed on the instrument was normal, but when she touched Silen's wrist, she discovered that it was ice cold. Looking at the temperature displayed on the instrument, the nurse touched Silen's wrist and forehead. It was still ice cold, and even his pulse was almost undetectable. How could this be? The nurse panicked and hurriedly pressed the emergency alarm bell beside her. The battlefield had ended, and Juanil was directing the post-battle cleanup, rescuing the wounded in the caves and other parts of the base. The waste treatment plant had also sent a message that the cleanup was complete. It was only now that Juanil could be considered to have relaxed a little. But that was all. He still had a series of things to take care of after the mission was over. Compensation for the dead and wounded, mission reports and post-battle analysis were all things that he had to handle personally. Juanil breathed deeply. This ordeal was finally over. Thank goodness those little devils were fine. As it turned out, Juanil had relaxed too early. Just as he finished exhaling, Juanil's communicator rang. Knight, who was dragging a bag full of rat claws and teeth back, saw Juanil yelling into the phone from afar. "A bunch of trash, I'm coming over right now." After ending the call, Juanil said something to a captain beside him and had Gerard come over to take charge of the follow-up matters. Then, he ran towards the spaceplane. Did something happen? Knight walked over and asked the captain. The captain did not think too much about it and said, "I think something happened to a patient on the spaceplane." Patient? There were not many people who could make Juanil rush over in such a hurry without even caring about the battlefield matters. However, comrades like Gerard and a few other captains who were close to Juanil were all on the battlefield. As for the patient on the spaceplane, Knight put down the bag and took out his communicator to make a call. It didn't take long before Pride's two nostrils appeared on the communicator. He said in an extremely sleepy and impatient tone, "What's all this noise about? I'm still sleeping. The doctor told me to rest more. If you delay my recovery, you," without waiting for Pride to finish, Knight cut off the call and dialed Silen's number, but no one picked up even after a long time. Knight no longer cared about the bag of spoils of war and ran towards the spaceplane. Everything had been fine just now. What had happened? Hard's ward. Although he was lying in the intensive care unit, Hard's swollen face and eyes showed that he was recovering well. Hard was talking to Serd, and Serd was telling him what had happened. As Serd spoke, the two of them heard a commotion outside. It sounded like they were heading towards the emergency room. "I wonder who it will be this time." Serd sighed. Not long after, a nurse came in and checked the infusion bag. She then took a sample from the bag and put it into the instrument in her hand for testing. Seeing that the nurse was clearly relieved, Serd asked curiously, "What's wrong?" The nurse replied with a reassuring smile, "I'm fine. You know, I can also ask the doctor directly." "Sigh, you're really fine here, but something happened to someone in the ward downstairs. We need to recheck every patient's medication." "The ward below? Who is it?" Serd asked casually. "I think it's someone called Silen." "Silen?" When Juanil arrived at the emergency room entrance, Serd was waiting there with Hard in his wheelchair. "Why did you come out? You need rest the most when your injury reappears." Hard could not salute like Serd when he saw Juanil. He raised his hand to salute but was stopped by Juanil. He said, "I don't feel at ease lying there." Behind Juanil, a person wearing a medic uniform ran over to report the situation. The data of the monitors inside the ward had been erased, the 2 monitors outside the ward had also been tampered with, and the instruments inside the ward had all been hacked and tampered with. That was why they did not send out any alarm when the patient's body was in danger. Most importantly, they couldn't find any suspicious people right now. Juanil looked at the records on the electronic notebook and frowned deeper and deeper. Negligence. A medic came over from the drug testing room and said to Juanil, "There is a highly toxic substance inside the infusion bag. According to the dosage, it can kill within half an hour, but the patient injected with this substance does not feel any discomfort at all. They will only feel more and more sleepy. Then, they will sleep until they die." The medic did not dare to say the last sentence, but everyone knew what it meant. Knight, who had rushed up to the ward downstairs when he did not see Scylla, just happened to hear this. He was so angry that he pulled out his gun and pointed it at the medic's head. "Are you people eating shit? Don't you know which bag is poisonous and which is not? Didn't you do any tests?" To a warrior, they had no regrets if they died on the battlefield, but their souls would not rest in peace if they died for no reason or value. Knight calmed down. Juanil motioned for the medics to pull Knight away, but failed to grab the gun in his hand. Knight broke free from their hands and put away his gun. He took the electronic notebook Juanil handed him and looked at the situation recorded on it. The monitors were tampered with and could not capture any suspicious people? Infusion bag. Wait a minute. I know who changed the infusion bag. Knight turned on his communicator and pulled up the communication record. It's this woman. Nurse? Juanil turned on his communicator, dialed a number and sent the video over. Investigate this woman. Not long after he disconnected, Juanil's communicator rang again. Juanil looked at the number. It was a special communicator from Seven Lights. Although the main mission this time was over, the follow-up work was still being handled. Normally speaking, the people from Seven Lights would not ask about it at this time. After all, it might involve military influence. Juanil suddenly felt nervous when he thought of someone. He gritted his teeth and accepted the call. The image flashed, and Mo Heng's unusually kind smiling face appeared on the screen. "Oh, little Nail." As expected, cold sweat poured down Juanil's back like a waterfall. He had never been this nervous even when he was facing that many black mice. Elder Mo, hello." Juanil's body tensed up as he saluted. Seeing Juanil's reaction, Mo Heng said, "What's wrong? You're sweating all over. Why are you so nervous when you see me? Am I scarier than those mutated black mice?" Mo Heng had a better understanding of the mission here. "It's more than scarier. It's much, much scarier." Juanil thought in his mind, but he really did not know how to answer. But before he could, Mo Heng spoke. "Something happened to Scylla?" How could Mo Heng not guess something from Juanil's reaction? But when Mo Heng said this, even Juanil on the other side of the communicator could feel the low pressure around Sir Mo. Sir Mo was about to flip out. Chapter 46. Speaking of which, Mo Heng's face turned from sunny to gloomy the moment he returned from his business trip and found the leave slip Scylla had left in the workshop. It caused everyone in the research division to keep quiet out of fear. Everyone knew that Sir Mo was in a bad mood, very bad at that. Because he knew certain things about the military operation, Mo Heng refrained from contacting him. It was only when he heard that the operation had come to an end, and that Scylla had analyzed and synthesized over 100 antibodies by himself that Mo Heng's mood improved a little. To quote Vice Headmaster and Ting's words, the old fox's tail had risen a little higher. But Mo Heng didn't expect that Sir Mo's cloudy mood would turn into a storm the moment he heard that Scylla was in trouble. Mo Heng's expression turned even darker as he listened to Huanil's explanation. You're saying that my disciple made such a great contribution despite his injuries, but in the end, he was stabbed in the back? Huanil was silent. With his understanding of Mo Heng, it was best not to speak at this time. What's the situation now? Mo Heng's voice turned deep and heavy. It was so heavy that it was almost unbearable. After resuscitation, the doctor said that he has stabilized a little. I'm still worried. I'll rush over with some people right now. Huanil was contacting Mo Heng from a lounge next to the emergency room. While Huanil was sweating profusely as he dealt with Mo Heng, a medic knocked on the door and came in. Huanil had told him before to inform him the moment there was any progress from the emergency room. Seeing that Huanil was contacting him, the medic passed him the tablet. After reading the contents of the tablet, Huanil immediately felt a little more confident. Elder Mo, I just received news that Silin is out of danger. Seeing Mo Heng's obviously distrustful gaze, Huanil took the communicator into the emergency room and showed Mo Heng the vital data on the device. Then, he looked at Silin's complexion. It was only after a long while that Mo Heng finally believed him a little. However, he still requested that Silin be sent back to Seven Lights as soon as possible. Otherwise, Mo Heng wouldn't be at ease. I'm telling you, this old man won't bat an eyelid even if everyone in the base is fed to the rats. Their value added together is far less than my disciples. Why should others pay with their lives when they themselves are incapable of causing a major incident? King pay with their lives. Why do they need someone else to wipe their ass for them? His son, General Mo Ching, was a true disciple of the old man. Back then, Huanil and Gerard had experienced General Mo's ruffian temperament firsthand. Once his ruffian temperament was activated, it would be hard for anyone to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. Not only that, the opinions he made were absolutely the opposite of subtlety. For a person like Mo Heng, when he was in a good mood, he would put on the appearance of an amiable senior academic, but when he got angry, he would have to pray for the best. That was the principle of a bully's temper. The world they face is big, but the world in their hearts is not necessarily big. So, when they want to protect someone, don't stop them. Huanil knew this very well. That was why he could only remain silent in the face of Mo Heng's outburst of extreme remarks. He would listen to them one moment and forget them the next. Otherwise, it would affect Sir Mo's amiable image when it got out. It was a good thing that he had asked all the medical personnel to leave when he came in. Otherwise, there's no point in talking about it. After giving Huanil a few more instructions, Mo Heng finally disconnected reluctantly. However, Huanil had to report to Mo Heng about Silin's situation every hour, or Mo Heng would personally rush over with his men. There was no way Huanil would dare trouble Sir Mo. After disconnecting, Mo Heng's expression didn't look much better. Ever since he decided to accept Silin as his direct disciple, he had investigated the Duance family. He knew about the dirty tricks and dirty dealings within the family. The Duance family's influence in the 10 trade sectors could be considered great, but it was completely useless to Mo Heng. Mo Heng looked at a person's ability, not their background or the benefits brought by their identity. He even hoped that Silin could leave the Duance family. It would be best if he didn't have any background at all, so that he wouldn't be caught in those dirty fights. However, now that something like this had happened, Mo Heng wouldn't just stand by and watch his disciple suffer. Someone had to pay the price. Although Mo Heng was in the academic field, in fact, the old man also had a heart of iron and blood. Just look at General Mo Ching. To be able to teach a person like General Mo, how could the old man be a soft-hearted person? Mo Heng adjusted the signal transmission code on his communicator and dialed a number. Some people had stretched their hands too far. They had gotten used to running amok in the 10 trade sectors, so they didn't know how big the universe was. Huanil, Knight, and the others began to track down the culprit. It didn't take long before they heard that the woman had committed suicide by injecting cyanide into the medicine warehouse. Moreover, she didn't avoid the warehouse's surveillance cameras and injected a large amount of cyanide right in front of them. She had no way to live after failing her mission and exposing herself. She couldn't understand why Celine was still alive even at the moment of her death. It had been so long since the injection, but he was still alive. How did this woman sneak into the medical ship? And who was covering for her? The interrogations and checks on medical personnel were also relatively strict. She definitely had accomplices, and more than one at that. It could be a soldier, it could be a researcher, it could be a medical personnel. Huanil also knew the complexity of the situation. When he recalled the promise he made to Emoheng immediately decided to have the ship send the wounded back to Seven Lights first. Celine, Pride and the others would assign special personnel to watch over them. Nothing could go wrong, or else the epaulets on his shoulders would have to be removed. While everyone was busy, Celine's mind was very clear even though he was asleep. He knew what was happening around him, knew Emoheng's concern for him, and knew that night, Hard and Surd had been standing guard outside the door all this time. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't touched. Genya had told Celine when he was very young that humans were social animals. The number of people who had brushed shoulders or swept their gazes across the galaxy was more than 100 billion, but the number of people who truly treated you well could be counted on one hand. This was a kind of wealth that could not be obtained no matter how much money or how long one spent. Even a loner would have a longing hidden in the depths of their heart. This show was developing according to Celine's expectations. He predicted that those people would have a backup plan, and the moment he saw the woman holding the medicine tray on the monitor, he knew that the backup plan had come. That was why he had left his communicator on and left a trail for Night to trace. Even if he couldn't, he could still force the killer to his death. This kind of killer who failed his mission and exposed himself was dead for sure. However, this incident also allowed Celine to feel the warmth he hadn't felt for a long time. It was the comfort he felt again after Genya and Hina left one after another. When he was lying on the sickbed, there was at least someone standing guard on the other side of the door. For someone his age, he had experienced too much. Chapter 47. On the airship, Celine, Pride and Hard were arranged to stay in the same sickroom. Surd and Night were also in the same sickroom. Although Night wasn't injured, Huanil still arranged for him to go back first. Night had no objections to this, and he felt a bit more at ease guarding the sickroom himself in case another assassination attempt occurred. Since the matter had come to an end, Celine recovered very quickly. Right now, the 5 of them were chatting in the room. 3 were lying down, 2 were sitting, and 3 were lying down. Surd was peeling fruits, and Night was narrating the news he had just heard. I heard that the big black mouse had doubled its chromosomes after mutation, and produced a batch of little black mice asexually. The form is just like the queen and drones of bees. But I don't know the specifics, so people from other research bases went over to study it together. You know, if the results of this research were to come out, it would at least be published in an academic electronic journal with more than 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Then they would become famous. Don't the people in the research base have any psychological trauma at all? Surd asked. Even now, whenever he talked about mice, he would recall the scene where he brushed past those black mice and felt an uncontrollable chill. That's what those people like. For example, if you were shot in the middle of an operation and managed to survive, would you be afraid of being robbed? Would you pick up a gun and participate in an operation next time? Of course I would participate in an operation. What's there to be afraid of with a gun? Isn't it normal to get shot? They are the same. Isn't it normal for them to research strange things? Sigh, don't interrupt me, I'll continue. Night cleared his throat and continued. I heard that those black mice produced a certain enzyme in their mutated bodies that allows them to continuously breathe without oxygen for a period of time. This also explains why they could stay in the deep underground cavern for such a long time. Knight was a person who always had an "I'm impatient" look on his face when facing others, but he had a different attitude and was a lot more talkative towards those he acknowledged. Seeing Knight's "I'm an expert" look, Pride glanced sideways and snorted, "What a shame! Oh ho, you have a problem with us, young master? Why don't you take a look at yourself? It's understandable that Sillen and Hard were injured, but what about you? Young master, useless burden?" When he saw Pride glaring at him indignantly, Knight threw a grape at him. "Don't tell me that you can't tell that the people in your group are special agents. It's precisely because I can tell that they are special agents that I don't want to be next to them. That's why you deserved to be scratched by the black mice. Was that something you could handle alone? Do you think you're a star-level hunter or a heavenly edict warrior? Use your brain more, or else you'll never catch up to your brother, Ji Feihong. If I can't become a heavenly edict warrior, do you think you can? At least I became one before you did," Knight said disdainfully. If it wasn't for Ji Feihong asking him to take care of him, would he even care about this idiot? When Surd saw that Pride was about to charge over and fight to the death, Surd immediately went up to mediate. Sillen was amused as he watched from the side. If Surd didn't step forward to mediate, Pride would probably get beaten up by Knight again. Similar incidents had already happened a few times. However, the Heavenly Edict warriors and star-ranked hunters that Knight mentioned caught Sillen's attention. There were countless hunters in the League of Stars, and those who stood at the top were awarded the title of Star, which was what Knight referred to as star-ranked hunters. Currently, in the hunter world of the League of Stars, there were a total of 6 people who held the title of Star. The leaders of the 4 great hunter regiments were all star-ranked hunters, and there were also 2 elusive loners. These 6 people were collectively known as the 6 Stars of Hunter. In the army, the Heavenly Edict warriors held the highest honor among warriors, and were awarded the title of Heavenly Edict. However, they were too mysterious, and many things were classified as top secret by the army. To the public, they only existed in legends. Even the descendants of generals like Knight and Pride were not clear about them. They only knew that there were 4 of them. The 4 Heavenly Edict generals and the 6 Stars of Hunter were the lifelong goals of warriors and hunters in this era. Only after this mission did we realize the difference between students and the regular army. "We still need to work hard," Hard sighed as he lay on his sickbed. Hearing Hard's words, Knight and Pride looked at Sillen at the same time without saying a word. "Hey, what kind of reward do you think the school will give us after we return?" Surd said expectantly. "Reward?" Knight rubbed his chin. "It's either credits or money. However, we will record a military merit in our files. It may not be a lot, but it's at least an honor. It will be more useful if we mix into the army in the future." "That's good enough. Military merit is enough." Hard grinned. When they arrived at Planet 7 Lights, the warship stopped at the space station and was transported by a spaceplane. They landed at the Training Division's special port. Sillen and Hard were pushed out in wheelchairs. Originally, Pride was supposed to be pushed as well, but he did not sit on it for the sake of his pride. A lot of people were already gathered at the Training Division's port, and some of 7 Lights' higher-ups were present as well. After all, this operation was due to the accident at 7 Lights research base. The students of the Training Division were all present, and so were Lung and C.I. Jincheng. However, Lung was winking at Sillen and pointing towards a certain direction with his chin. There was a very familiar long flying car parked there. After Sillen was pushed out of the spaceplane, a person walked down from the flying car. When Knight saw that person, he abandoned Sillen and retreated without any sense of loyalty. From the looks of it, he was trying to hide as far away as possible. When Sillen saw the newcomer, the corner of his lips twitched. "Why are you here?" Emoheng looked at Sillen seriously from head to toe with a stern face. After confirming that he had recovered well, he raised his hand and pinched. At the Training Division's port, the students and school higher-ups who came to greet and comfort the wounded, and the people who came down from the spaceplanes added up to several thousand people. Under the gazes of these several thousand people, Silin was pinched and reprimanded by Mo Heng. Mo Heng's strong and vigorous voice could be heard in the huge port. There were a lot of seniors among the students who came here, and they had only seen Mo Heng's amiable appearance before. When had they ever seen Vice Headmaster Mo like this? Every single one of them fell silent. Just looking at Silin's face pinched by Mo Heng was enough to make their faces hurt. However, the school higher-ups were surprised. Those who knew Mo Heng well knew that he would only pinch someone's face if it was someone he cared a lot about. Moreover, Mo Heng might look like he was reprimanding Silin, but he was actually telling everyone else that this kid was under his protection, and they would have to go through this old man first if they wanted to touch him. 10 trade sectors, inside a manor on a planet at Sector D that was not far away from the bustling city. Aflon was watering leisurely with a watering can, and behind him, Officer Sappho was reporting the situation. Those families have suffered quite a bit from this incident. The military's seizure of supplies, the government's sudden investigation, the termination of business partnerships, and even the famous academics who were invited as guests have changed their minds. Aflon did not react much to the report. After he was done watering, he put down the watering can and wiped his hands with a towel Sappho passed to him. Then, he said, triple his bounty this time. Yes. Then, the person responsible for contacting 7 Lights. Follow the original plan. Alright, I'll get to it right away. Chapter 48. Careful, watch your legs. Hey, be gentle. At 7 Lights Technology Development Zone's Research Division Hospital, Mo Heng was directing people to transfer Silin from the wheelchair to the hospital bed. Silin had said that he could move on his own, but Mo Heng did not listen to him at all. On one hand, he wore a look of disdain as if Silin was a troublesome person, and on the other, his hands were constantly directing the people carrying Silin to move as if he was afraid that Silin would bump into something. Silin wanted to cry but had no tears. In reality, he could kill 10 black mice with his bare hands right now without suffering a single injury, but who told him to pretend to be sick? Pretending to be sick was a very painful thing. He brought this upon himself. Although the medical equipment showed that Silin was completely able to leave the hospital, Mo Heng still forced Silin to continue recuperating for another 10 days, and no one was allowed to visit him during these 10 days. In reality, this was probably his punishment for Silin's sudden leave to participate in the training division's dangerous mission. Every day, Silin could only communicate with other people through the microcomputer. 7 Lights had an internal communication platform, and Silin's friend list only had 5 people: Knight, Lung, Ci Jincheng, Hard and Surd. Although there were only 5 of them, the chat box was flashing non-stop every day. Today, when Silin woke up in the morning and turned on the microcomputer, several messages popped up. They were all talking about the same thing: the rat extermination mission that the 5 of them had participated in. Now that the matter over at the biochemistry base had been resolved, there was no longer a need to hide it any longer. Moreover, even if every student in the training division kept it a secret, some students who were not part of the training division could always inquire about it if they wanted to. Since the matter over at the base had been exposed, Silin and the other 5 students who participated in the mission had also been exposed. There were even people who had created a strength ranking for them. Silin opened the 7 Lights forum, according to the forum address Knight left behind. As expected, the first few hot threads were related to them, and there were even pictures of the black mice at the top. There were a lot of replies below, some positive, some negative. Of course, there were also people who came purely to see the mice. As for the ranking of the 5, from 1st to 5th, they were Knight, Pride, Surd, Hard and Silin. As for why the ranking was like this, there was a reason. Why were Hud and Silin at the end of the line? When they got off the spaceplane that day, only the 2 of them were sitting. Hard was discharged the next day, but Celine had to wait a few more days. That was why he was the last one in line. Pride should be thankful that he insisted on not sitting in a wheelchair that day. Otherwise, he would have died of depression if he had to queue behind Serd. However, the more Celine read, the more ridiculous the content became. Where did it start to stray from? This was due to the person on the 1626th comment, buy-in. As soon as this person replied, the comments below began to go astray until they had nothing to do with the content of the post. This was probably what Knight and the rest wanted Celine to see. This is what the old man said. Actually, I'm more optimistic about the fifth one. As a result, the people below began to reply, and judging from the time, the speed at which they replied was extremely fast. In less than a minute, more than 5 pages were filled. Surprise appearance of Beauty Sa. Beauty Sa, did you see the vow of true love I wrote to you 57 days, 12 hours, 38 minutes and 3 seconds ago? Is this the legendary Beauty Sa? Could it be that Beauty Sa is interested in the fifth brat? What? Beauty Sa is interested in the fifth brat. Beauty Sa, have you already given your heart to the fifth brat? Breaking news, Beauty Sa has a crush on a first-year junior. Which bastard is the fifth? Drag him out and strip him. Celine was speechless. He really admired their ability to twist words. He had witnessed how they could turn a grape into a durian, and each of them was more confident than the other. Celine was speechless at the replies when the chat window started to flash again. Lung and Knight's avatars kept flashing. What now? He clicked it open and saw that both of them had sent him a large picture. On the picture was a girl wearing very fresh light-colored casual attire. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was wearing a sun hat. Her expression could not be seen clearly, and she was holding a bouquet of flowers in her hands. The main point of this picture was that its background was the hospital Celine was staying in. Celine, look at the main page of Seven Lights Forum. C.I. Jincheng sent over a message. When he returned to the main page of the forum, he saw that all the posts marked in red were incomparably eye-catching. They were all posts about that Beauty Sa, and there were countless comments denouncing Celine, Beauty Sa's rumored boyfriend. There was also a pinned post titled, Live Stream of Beauty Sa Visiting Her Rumored Boyfriend. The more Celine read, the more confused he became. He didn't even know who Beauty Sa was, so what the hell was this rumored boyfriend? The little speaker below the chat window kept ringing, and Celine immediately clicked on the simultaneous call button. Hello, Celine, have you seen Beauty Sa yet? Celine, you're actually raising wildflowers, no, delicate flowers behind our backs. There's an adultery going on, we demand the truth. While the two big mouths, Lung and Knight, were quarreling, the door to Celine's ward opened with a beep. The medical robot walked in, and behind it was the Beauty Sa that Celine saw on the picture. Hi, Duance Celine. The newcomer revealed a cheerful smile and greeted him generously. Oh, it's Beauty Sa. The voices on the other side came to an abrupt halt, because Celine had turned off the microcomputer directly and looked at the newcomer. At the same time, Lung, who was at the trade zone, and Knight, who was at the training division, were hopping mad. Celine actually dared to turn off the microcomputer. Could it be that he was going to do something he loved? The duo's thoughts had already begun to diverge. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Gallo Teresa, 5th year, from the Research Division's Design Institute. She wasn't seductive, but carried a kind of refreshing beauty. Her every move gave off a feeling of magnanimity, and she was very approachable. This was everyone's first impression of Teresa. Celine did not know who the others were referring to as Beauty Sa, but he knew the name Teresa. There were introductions of famous people in Seven Lights in the school's handbook, and Teresa was one of them. Teresa was a famous talented girl from the Research Division's Design Institute. She was a specially recruited student, and she was promoted straight to 5th year after 3 years of school. She studied under Seven Lights' famous Her Majesty and the wife of Seven Lights Institute's headmaster, Professor Lin, Old Madam Lin. Professor Lin and Mo Heng were old acquaintances, so it was no wonder that Mo Heng allowed her to come in. Is Professor Lin's project done? Silin asked. He had heard from Ling Long that Queen Lin was going on a business trip to Sector A for a project. From the looks of it, Teresa must have gone with Queen Lin. Teresa put the flower in her hand into a vase at the side. Yeah, we just came back today as well. Professor Mo praised you quite a bit at the dinner table today, and there aren't many people who can earn such high praise from him. Celine shrugged his shoulders and did not comment. Glancing at the microcomputer next to Silin, Teresa smiled and said, I've been gone for a long time. I saw your post while browsing the Seven Lights forum today, so I casually replied to it. I didn't expect the reaction to be so big though. But senior sister, you don't look sorry at all. Hee hee. Teresa did not deny it either. After chatting casually for a while, Teresa stood up and bid farewell. It had been a while since she left Seven Lights for the project, and old Madame Lin was still waiting to deal with some trivial matters in Seven Lights. She could not stay here any longer. Thank you for coming to visit, senior sister. I'll treat you to a meal after I'm discharged. All right, I'll be waiting. Less than 5 minutes had passed since Teresa entered the hospital until she left, but the Seven Lights forum was already in an uproar. Although there was only a picture of Teresa entering and leaving the hospital, just this alone was enough to make everyone's imagination roam. Then, someone used some unknown method to confirm that Teresa had indeed gone to Silin's ward. As a result, the entire Seven Lights forum boiled over. However, Silin did not pay any attention to them. After Teresa had left, Silin flipped his hand open. It was a debit card. Teresa had patted Silin's shoulder before she left, and it was also at that time that she had passed the card to Silin. No wonder he kept feeling that something was amiss. So the contact person was her. This was also why Silin had said that he would treat her to a meal after Teresa had left the hospital. Silin smiled meaningfully. Other than knowing that she was the contact person, Silin had also discovered a secret. As expected of a strong competitor for the Duance family's successor, Aflon had hidden himself well. Chapter 49. Silin was finally allowed to leave the hospital by Mo Heng, and he even wrote a touching and incisive 10,000-word self-criticism. But in the 10,000-word self-criticism, there wasn't a single sentence such as never again that Mo Heng really wanted to read. In Mo Heng's words, this was a machine without a core component. One word, trash. However, although the self-criticism was a little trash, Mo Heng still framed it and hung it in his office. Every time Silin went over to submit a mission, Mo Heng would point at the self-criticism on the wall and blah 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 blah. Of course, this was a story for another time. When Silin left the hospital and returned to the hostel, the door behind him was closed the moment he entered. There were 3 chairs in the living room, and 3 people were sitting on them. They were in the posture of a tripartite hearing. The trio who were usually too busy to return to the hostel were all present. Ci Jincheng was playing with the control panel in his hand. If Silin were to run out right now, he would probably be attacked by some unknown substance. Knight was moving his wrists and pressing his fingers loudly. Lung was smiling wickedly at the side. Severe punishment for confessing or resistance to streaking. Choose one. Silin looked at the trio, calmly dragged over a chair and sat down facing them. I choose C. You bastard! The trio rushed up and pressed Silin down, strangling him. Hurry up, what's your relationship with Beauty Sa? Beauty Sa's supporters are already at our doorstep. Look, they even threw rotten eggs. Lung pointed at a yellow spot at the window and complained. Bullshit, there's actually someone in Seven Lights who dares to bully you? That was obviously thrown out when you were trying to fry an egg. There's even oil on it, don't think I don't know. Be gentler, my neck is going to break if you keep strangling me. I'll talk, alright? After finally freeing his neck and catching his breath, Silin explained the cause and effect. A long while later, Knight asked suspiciously, Is it really because of Professor Mo and Professor Lin that she knows about you? Ask her if you don't believe me. Lung looked thoughtful. So you're saying that you're the closest to the water, right? It's the right time, the right place, and the right people. If you still can't get it, you'll be too weak. Night also came over mysteriously. What did you guys do in those 5 minutes? Chatting. What else? Still chatting. After trying hard to discern Silen's facial expressions, the three of them said in disappointment, "What a talent." Speaking of which, when the students on the Seven Lights Forum dug out Silen's identity and background, there were indeed some who gave up. In terms of looks, Silen was certainly not bad. His temperament would definitely make people's eyes light up. In terms of status and background, he was a member of the Duance family, and his father, Aflon, was on the rise recently, and the position of heir was not far away. At that time, he would be the crown prince of the Duance family. Other than some forces in sectors A, B, and C, there really weren't many forces that could surpass the Duance family. In terms of talent and learning, he was Elder Mo's student. How could he have become Elder Mo's student if he didn't have some ability? In terms of strength, there was no need to even mention this guy. He had carried guns and killed rats before, and his individual combat strength was ranked top 5 in the training division. How could he compare? Therefore, more people were inclined towards watching the show and gossiping. The next day, Silen took his hoverboard and prepared to go out. The trio eating breakfast looked at him at the same time. Today is the weekend. There's no class. I'm treating Teresa to a meal today. Silen was fairly frank. Fuck! Animal! The trio took out a bunch of tools the moment Silen's front foot left the hoverboard. Reception is normal. Let's test the satellite surveillance. Let's see how that Silen guy picks up a beauty this time. Silen knew that the 3 scumbags in the hoverboard would not be idle, but he did not plan to avoid them. After buying a few things on the way, Silen came to a forest outside the school zone and arrived at the agreed place with Teresa. Teresa was already waiting there. She was still dressed in simple and elegant attire, and she looked exceptionally harmonious when combined with the surrounding scenery. Sorry to keep you waiting. Silen put away the hoverboard and took out the food he just bought. It's fine. I purposely came early. It did surprise a lot of people to come to the forest area for a picnic instead of a restaurant. Why did he say that it was a lot of people? Other than the 3 idiots in Silen's hoverboard, there were even more people who were tracking Teresa. However, be it from the satellite or using binoculars from afar, the dense forest was their biggest obstacle. They could not see clearly even if they used a fluoroscope. Therefore, they could only see 2 people sitting there, enjoying their picnic and chatting happily while watching the flowing stream. There were already a lot of photos posted on the Seven Lights forum. Although they were separated by a large patch of leaves, one could still see the 2 people sitting by the stream. They could not help but let their imaginations run wild. Inside Silen's hoverboard, Lung complained incessantly, "Silen is so cunning. He actually went to such a remote place. The image is blocked by the leaves. We really should install a bug on that guy." Of course, Lung was only saying it casually. They also knew that there was a limit to everything. Moreover, C.I. Jincheng was the one who threw the tracker into Silen's bag in broad daylight, and Silen did not say anything about it. This proved that he was not trying to hide his tracks at all. They must be talking about a beautiful life and a romantic future. Many people thought so, but in reality, the topic Silen and Teresa were talking about had absolutely nothing to do with romance. Since this incident dealt a huge blow to the opponent, Mr. Duance Aflon has paid 3 times the reward. I believe that it will not be any less for the next 2 months. Teresa said. My mentor, Professor Mo, has taken action? Not only that, your 3 roommates have all taken action. The military, business, government, and academia have all given some pressure. I heard that the assassin organization has also been put on a wanted list, and they have been thinking of taking revenge on their sugar daddy recently. Silen smiled when he heard this, and said nothing. Although the suppression from many sides will make those people restrain themselves a little, Mr. Aflon told me to tell you that some people from the Duance family might take this opportunity to make a move. This way they can shift the blame onto those unlucky bastards, so you should be careful for the time being. However, I think that Mr. Aflon is worrying too much. With your abilities, there is absolutely no problem for you to deal with these people. You really think highly of me. Silen turned his head to look at that little stream. Unlike the purely man-made streams of planet brown Earth, this place had a beauty that leaned towards nature. There was even a crab under that rock. When he was young, he would often go to the stream that was slightly further away from the slums to play with Hina, but there was nothing else there other than rocks and water. Hina even said that there was no life in that stream, and that if she could one day see an overflowing stream with all kinds of little fishes, prawns and crabs on TV, she would definitely be very happy. Silen touched the pendant hanging in front of his chest inside his clothes. Do you see it? Hina, there are crabs here. This stream is alive, and we will see even more lively streams in the future. Who are you thinking of? Teresa asked. In that instant just now, the gentleness in Silen's eyes seemed to be able to drown a person in it. I'm thinking of crabs. Silen stretched his back. Is there anything else? No. I'll tell you when I receive news in the future. As long as you remember the payment. You will absolutely not be left out of this. Let's end our meeting here. I see that you're getting impatient as well. Let's give each other a goodbye kiss before we leave. When she was done, Teresa leaned forward and leaned towards Silen. On the screens of many Seven Lights students, they saw Beauty Saw and Silen lean towards each other. The distance between them grew closer and closer, and then, fuck! The tree leaves blocked it. Lung pointed at the tree leaves that blocked the screen and said angrily, I'll give anyone who cuts down that bastard tree 100 million. At the same time, in another room, Ling Long crushed the fifth microcomputer of the day. Everyone knew that the duo had kissed. Did they really kiss? It was true. But it was just the face. Teresa had only kissed Silen's face, but due to the effect of the tree leaves, everyone took it for granted. Teresa's grasp of the angle was very good. She knew exactly which direction they would be monitored from. After cleaning up the things on the ground, Silen displayed his hoverboard. Teresa pressed the key button, and a flying car flew up not far away. Its color turned from green to white. It was the camouflage color she used earlier. Do you need a ride? Teresa asked as she sat inside the car. No thanks. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Remember the payment. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Both parties left in two different directions. However, Silen flew along the stream for a while longer, and not many people paid attention to him anymore. Knight and the others also opened the forum and looked at the posts. The entire Seven Lights forum was filled with hot posts regarding Silen and Teresa. There were pictures and the truth. The moment Silen entered the room, Knight and Lung threw down their microcomputers and ran towards him. Kid, hurry up and tell us the crucial part of today's. Fuck, crabs, where did you get these crabs? They're so fresh. Knight and Lung did not care about the picnic kissing incident any longer. The duo rubbed their hands around a big bag of crabs. Ci Jincheng. These two gluttons. That night, while everyone else in Seven Lights was spitting saliva around the forum, the four people in Silen's room were happily eating crabs around the table. Chapter 50. The Shisha incident may have caused quite a stir, but it only lasted for a few days before it was completely overshadowed by another matter. The sector championship was about to begin. What was a sector championship? It was a sector championship that all the universities in Sector B and C and the top 10 universities in the 10 trade sectors would participate in. It included events such as mech combat, gun combat, wrestling, integrated warfare, and so on. It was a gathering of experts and geniuses from all over the world to show off their skills. It was also the most influential competition among the universities every year, and it had a special section on the electronic magazine Gathering of Stars that had over 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Gathering of Stars was an electronic magazine that specialized in reporting all kinds of competitions. It was the electronic magazine with the highest contribution points in the competitive competition category, and it had a great influence on the entire League of Stars. The importance of this competition could be seen from its special section on Gathering of Stars. Moreover, this competition was closely related to each university's student source in the coming year. If a university did not have any outstanding performance in the sector championship, then who would be willing to enroll? Seven Lights was undoubtedly the beneficiary of this competition. In recent years, Seven Lights had been steadily occupying fifth place, and this was something every Sector B university was jealous of. Why was it that they were jealous of a mere fifth place? It was because the top 4 spots of the Sector Championship were all occupied by the 4 military academies of Sector C. After all, the people of Sector C were all people who had trained their skills through hard work. Therefore, the universities of Sector B would compete for 5th place every year, but most of the time it was occupied by Seven Lights. That was why Seven Lights had the honor and reputation it had today. This was also one of the reasons why so many big families and forces thought of ways to send their children to Seven Lights every year. Seven Lights was like a rich family, and entering this rich family was absolutely beneficial to one's future development. Seven Lights had no lack of descendants of rich families like Lung and Pride, but the ones who truly pushed Seven Lights to the peak were almost all the specially recruited students. Therefore, Seven Lights treated the specially recruited students quite handsomely. Old professors like Mo Hung preferred specially recruited students because they had flashes of ascending to the peak. Recently, the number of people in Seven Lights at the Trade Street and the entertainment Sleepless City had decreased a lot. The training division and the school zone's training rooms were almost full every day, and some people stayed in their dorms all day long to warm up on the Sector Championship's combat platform. The Sector Championship's combat platform was only opened a month before the Sector Championship, and it would shut down after the Sector Championship. The Sector Championship battle platform had training grounds for all kinds of competitions. Although it was only a virtual area, some training grounds would still be full, and those who wanted to train would have to queue up. In fact, apart from the final integrated battle, which was a real battle, the rest of the Sector Championship's matches were all conducted on the Sector Championship's battle platform. However, because the sensors would reflect the physical conditions of the contestants onto the platform, the virtual characters on the battle platform were actually not much different from the physical conditions of real people in reality. Therefore, physical training was also a must. There were no special criteria to qualify to participate in the Sector Championship. Students from the 1st to the 4th grade could participate, but those from the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade could not. In reality, they could only be considered as half students. For those who continued to pursue their studies, they were already considered as half professionals, and thus could not participate in the Sector Championship. For example, the military academies in Area C or the universities in the 10 trade zones only had 4 grade. For the sake of fairness, the students of Sector B who are pursuing their studies do not have the right to participate in this tournament. It could be said that Knight had been looking forward to this match for a long time. He was full of ambition, and his heart was set on knocking those people out of the military academy to appease his hatred for not being able to enter the military academy. For the past few days, Knight had almost never left his room. He had set up a special storage cabinet in his bedroom, and he would eat whenever he was hungry. After he was done eating, he would continue to fight on the Sector Championship's platform. He even wished he could hug the sensors to sleep. Registering an account on the Sector Championship's platform required a Seven Lights card as identification, and each student could only have one account. Therefore, the second, third, and fourth grade students already had accounts, and their accounts would only be erased after graduation. There were no classes scheduled during the sector championship, and even if there were classes, Silen could choose not to attend them. His current credits were already enough for him to enter third grade straight away, not to mention that he had Sir Mo Heng's support. The instructors in charge of the class turned a blind eye to Silen's absence. He turned on his microcomputer, put on the sensors, opened the sector championships platform, and scanned his 7 lights card to register his account. The account name Silen entered was ShadowX, and the account name was displayed as usable. After various verifications, the registration was finally displayed as a success, and only a simple introduction was displayed in the ShadowX's information bar. ID, ShadowX gender, male genotype rank, B school, 7 lights battle information, none other than the ID. The other information was automatically generated based on the 7 lights card, and they were all real information. Since he had not participated in any competition yet, many of the display bars were blank. After the information was confirmed, a choice of appearance and physique popped up. He could choose to display it as it really was, or he could modify it himself. The initial appearance that popped up was very similar to a kind of housework robot that Mo Hung and the others had created. It looked very common and there was nothing special about it. However, Mo Hung had always liked to add extra beautification and modification to robots, and Silen was too lazy to do so many unnecessary things. It wouldn't affect his participation in the sector championship anyways. The reason why Silen participated in the sector championship was originally just to see the geniuses from all over the world, and to improve himself from the fights. He didn't think that it was necessary for him to fight for a place. After all, even if he did fight for first place, it would only belong to Silen Duance and not him. However, Silen had still underestimated the importance people placed on face engineering. When Silen finished registering and officially walked into the sector championships platform, the first thing he heard was, "Fuck! This guy is actually running naked on the sector championships platform." Therefore, the first day Silen entered the sector championships platform, he appeared on the homepage of the sector championships forum. Sudden appearance of a naked man. ShadowX had already become known before he had even started a single match. There were even some 7 light students who accused ShadowX of losing the school's face and tarnishing its reputation. Silen was very speechless. It wasn't like this robot was showing its dick, and it looked just like those anthropomorphic housework robots that usually ran around the street. Since the system had set up such a generic robot option, then it must have been chosen by someone. Naked my ass. Moreover, whether or not it was tarnishing the school's reputation was earned through fighting, not words. Silen paid no more attention to those bored people. He decided to find someone to spar with first and familiarize himself with platform combat. Coincidentally, there was also a person who had just finished registering and walked out of the newbie area at this time. The person was wearing camouflage clothing, and he told everyone directly that he was from Sector C's military academy. Silen looked at his information. Fong, male, 3rd Military Academy, rank A genotype. Not bad, a good target to practice on. Silen sent a 1v1 challenge request straight away. Fong seemed a little surprised. He was challenged the moment he came out, and it was by a rank B genotype non-military academy student no less. Why did he dare to challenge him, a military academy's rank A genotype? Generally speaking, there were many times when rank B genotype military academy students would tie or even win against non-military academy rank A genotype non-military academy students. It was no wonder that Fong was so surprised. Fong's first reaction was that this kid's brain had gone haywire, but it would be too embarrassing to refuse. After all, this was the first challenge request on the Sector Championships platform. Therefore, Fong pressed the accept button. Chapter 51. There were tens of thousands of students practicing their solo battles on the Sector Championships platform every second of the day. Therefore, as a newcomer, no one had applied to watch the match between Shadow X and Fong right now. Moreover, since they were newly registered accounts, the to's followed and followed sections were both blank, so no one could know about their match in time. Those who posted about the streaking incident on the forum's front page would not follow Shadow X. That was just a form of entertainment they happened to encounter after their intense training. Meanwhile, those who criticized Shadow X would not follow him either, because that would make them feel humiliated. This also caused them to miss a great opportunity. Both sides agreed to enter the individual battlefield after the match. After pressing start, Fong did not move. After all, the opponent was only a rank B genetic student from a non-military academy. If he made the first move, it would feel like he was bullying the weak. Silin also knew what the opponent was thinking, so he made the first move. A white shadow flashed over. For normal people, it might be very fast, but for Fong, it was just average. Therefore, while Fong raised his hand to block the attack, he was also distracted to evaluate the opponent's posture. Not bad, while Fong was thinking. He realized that his arm was somehow shaken away a little when he was about to block the opponent. It was precisely this gap that allowed the opponent's hand to cleverly pass through the gap and attack him twice as fast as before. Bang! Fong took a few steps back from the attack. Silin evaluated inwardly. As expected of a military academy. If it was anyone else, they would have been sent flying, but the one in front of him only took a few steps back. His physique was very strong and his reaction was also very fast. Although he could not avoid this attack due to his distraction, the bones and muscles in Fong's chest were all in a highly defensive state the moment Silin attacked, reducing the attack power of this attack. Moreover, even if Silin took the opportunity to launch a combo attack while Fong was retreating, Fong believed that he was already prepared. After Fong stood still and looked at this guy who looked like a generic robot, he suddenly felt a little hot on his face. He was actually beaten back by a rank B genetic newbie who was not from a military academy. Moreover, seeing that the opponent did not come up but stood there quietly as if waiting for him to recover, Fong felt a little angry. He had let his guard down. Before the opening of the Sector Championships platform, the instructors had told them not to look down on non-military academies. There were plenty of crouching tigers and hidden dragons there, and it all depended on whether or not you could encounter them. He didn't expect to meet such a person as soon as he registered. There was anger, but Fong's fighting spirit was even stronger in his heart. He got into a defensive stance and signaled his opponent to attack. Seeing that Fong was ready, and he wasn't distracted this time, Silin also increased his strength. Silin's moves seemed to be light, but when he was close to Silin, he suddenly accelerated and changed his moves erratically. It was difficult for Fong to judge Silin's intention in that instant. Besides, Silin's moves were secretly powerful. One blow could make Fong retreat a few steps. The more times he was repelled, the more steps Fong retreated. When Fong was beaten back for the 5th time, he also felt that something was wrong. The other party seemed to have been testing him. To put it bluntly, they were playing. A surge of anger rushed up, and Fong didn't care so much anymore. Let's fight then. It's not my style to hide. This time, Fong didn't defend and took the initiative to attack. At the same time, in a certain dormitory in the 3rd Military Academy, 3 people exited from battle mode after ending their own battles. As expected, we can only find people from the military academies to fight. Those people in Sector B are too weak. One person complained. You're still looking for people in Sector B? Leave those to the first years. We can only find our own kind. Like me, I've been picking people from the 1st and 4th military academies. The 1st Military Academy ranked 2nd in the Sector Championship last year, the 3rd Military Academy was still ranked 3rd, and the 4th Military Academy was the champion. As for the 2nd Military Academy, because they ranked last among the 4 military academies. They were laughed at by the other military academies last year. Oh right, that guy from the first years should have registered too, right? You mean that Fong Faradin? The 3rd Military Academy's first-year Faradin was ranked 5th in terms of individual combat strength. The students called him Fong. However, he seemed to have been sent on some mission by the instructors a few days ago. There was no news about Faradin a few days before the opening of the Sector Championships platform. Do you know what his registered name is? Look it up. Just search for Fong. He should be using this nickname. There really is one. He just registered today, and the information shows that he's from our 3rd Military Academy. But he's currently in a match. Match! The rest of the people in the dormitory swarmed over. Most of the military academies were dormitories with 4 to a dozen people. This dormitory alone had 8 people. The 8 of them gathered together and discussed. The opponent is actually from 7 Lights, and he's just a rank B genotype no less. With Faradin's strength, why would he bully someone from 7 Lights? It's already been 16 minutes, and it's not over yet. Faradin is probably going easy on him. He's a newbie after all. While they were talking, the screen showed that the match had ended. Ha, it's over. I told you that Faradin kid, He lost? How is that possible? Fong's battle status was shockingly displayed as 1 loss, while Shadow X's was displayed as 1 win. After a moment of silence, someone spoke up. This Fong isn't that Fong, is he? They were silent. According to the information, it should be Faradin, but the result of this match was too strange. Wait, let me ask. One of them opened the 3rd Military Academy's in-school chat software. Right now, in one of the 3rd Military Academy's dormitories, Faradin sat there drenched in sweat. Both his arms were trembling, and he was panting heavily. The rest of the people in the dormitory were shocked by Faradin's appearance, but when they saw Fong's battle situation on the screen, it was as if they had seen a ghost. Faradin felt the throbbing pain in his muscles, and the sensors clearly transmitted the pain to him. Shadow X was practically using the entanglement formula earlier, pestering him and continuously increasing his strength until he finally forced his own fighting spirit to the point where it turned into killing intent. Faradin held his head with his hands. The sweat on his forehead kept dripping down when he thought of that moment. Shadow X looked like a generic robot, but at that moment, he looked like a demon king. If this was a real battle, Faradin was certain that he would be dead already. Completely and utterly dead, and his arms would be broken into pieces. After sorting out his thoughts, Faradin took a deep breath and moved his slightly stiff arms a little. Faradin, that Shadow X, very strong. That guy is very strong. Faradin sighed. Then, he stood up and took his communicator to the balcony. After Faradin walked out, the few people in the room exchanged glances with each other. There really weren't many people of the same age who could be evaluated as very strong by Faradin. Therefore, they logged into the Sector Championship platform, searched for Shadow X, and added him as their followers. When the people in the upper grade dormitory saw that there was no response from the in-school chat loudspeaker, they were guessing the reason. Then, someone shouted. Someone added him as their follower. The number of people following Shadow X was displayed as 5. When they clicked on it, all 5 of them were freshmen from the 3rd Military Academy. 5 minutes later, Fong focused on Shadow X. The in-school loudspeaker also played Faradin's reply. Fong, it's me. Shadow X is very strong. Faradin did not become depressed just because he lost his first battle on the Sector Championship platform. On the contrary, he was very excited right now, and did not deliberately hide his loss to Shadow X. He had told the instructor about this just now, and the instructor had analyzed the reason for it. Moreover, it was very beneficial for Faradin to find his own shortcomings and inadequacies. Every time he came into contact with a new fighting style, it was the best opportunity to improve himself. Shadow X's fighting style was undoubtedly a very good example. Faradin's reply caused the upper-grade dormitories to boil with excitement. Therefore, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, this was also the reason why the generic robot Shadow X had attracted the attention of tens of thousands of people on the first day. Moreover, the people who were paying attention to him were all the students of the 3rd Military Academy. Chapter 52. Sillin had frequently received challenge requests from military academy students after the Fong's battle, but he only accepted one challenge every day because he didn't have that much time. Although the sector championship was a relatively important competition to many people, it was not even comparable to a tiny spare part to his mentor Mo Heng. Other than Mo Heng, there were also some people like Ci Jincheng and Lung who did not place much importance on the sector championship. Ci Jincheng had gone on a business trip to the communication base at a nearby asteroid, while Lung had gone to manage his business. Some of Planet 7 Light's supplies came from Andryara's family, and because the sector championship was approaching, the demand for certain items had begun to skyrocket. More than half of the necessities such as microcomputers and sensors were supplied by Andryara, and then 7 Lights would sell them to the students. Lung was probably collecting money even in his dreams right now. The sector championship was nothing but a money-making tool to him. During the first 3 days after he registered on the sector championship platform, every time Sillin logged on, he would discover a huge pile of challenge requests in his inbox, and all of them were from the military academies. The 3rd Military Academy was the only one on the first day, but by the second day, the other 3 military academies had jumped out as well. Sillin only picked a random person to fight, slept until the next day after the battle, and then went to the research division to complete Mo Heng's assignment. It was only during these 3 days that Sillin fought on the sector championship platform, and on the 4th day, Sillin was ordered by Mo Heng to stay at the research division to complete a large mechanical assembly. It would probably take a few days. In Mo Heng's words, "Isn't it just a warm-up before the match? Why are you messing around with those people? Hurry up and get down to business." This was one of the rare tactful words from Sir Mo. If he was a little more direct, those hot-blooded students fighting passionately on the sector championship platform would probably bang their heads against a wall and die. Because once, Sillin heard Mo Heng mutter, "No matter how hard I work, I'm still only number 5, just like that." Sillin temporarily left the sector championship platform and threw himself wholeheartedly into Mo Heng's great mechanical plan. In other words, it had only been 3 days since Sillin logged onto the sector championship's platform. He had challenged 1 person and accepted 2 challenges. In total, he had 3 matches, and his record was 3 wins and 0 losses. 3 wins and 0 losses. There was nothing special about him just by looking at his battle record. There were plenty of people with over 100 wins and 0 losses on the sector championship platform, but what was special was that there were 2 special characters among the 3 people Sillin had fought. One was the first person he had challenged in the 3rd Military Academy, who was ranked 5th in terms of individual combat strength, Faradin, ID Tusk. The other was the fellow from the 4th Military Academy with the ID Invincible Champion, whom Sillin had randomly drawn. He wasn't a new student. It was precisely because of these 2 that the number of people from the 3rd and 4th military academies who challenged Sillin in the following period of time was exceptionally high. Of course, Sillin did not know about these recent events, at least. When he was assembling his machinery, he did not have the time to think about the sector championship. Sillin was not currently working in his own workshop, but in Mo Heng's large workshop. At this moment, Sillin was staring blankly at the piles of sorted parts all by himself. So many! Mo Heng was sitting leisurely on a chair not too far away, his legs propped up on the table, and he picked up a cup of tea to taste. "As punishment for you taking leave for no reason before, I'll leave these to you. There were originally 10 parts waiting to be assembled, but Master has specially picked the most complicated one. See how much Master loves you." Emohing said in a hurried tone of kowtowing and thanking Master for his kindness. Take leave for no reason, my ass. The corner of Silen's mouth twitched. Master, you really hurt me to death. Silen emphasized the word hurt. Of course, who asked you to be my disciple? Ever since Silen found out that being a research assistant in this circle was almost equivalent to being a disciple, and a true disciple at that, Silen felt that his future was filled with parts. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and get to work. Don't think I don't know that you ate 3 big bowls of rice, a pot of noodles, and a plate of roast chicken for breakfast. You have all the strength you need right now, kid. Also, as my supervisor, don't even think of slacking off. If the overall accuracy can't reach 96% of the theoretical value, then dismantle it and start over again. Emohing patted the monitor next to him. The program had already been set up, and it was just waiting for Silen to start calculating the overall accuracy. Silen looked at Emohing helplessly. Thank you for your grace, Master. You're welcome. If the students outside saw Emohing's appearance, their jaws would definitely drop. At this moment, Emohing was completely devoid of his usual amiable smile and the steady temperament of a senior professor. Vice Headmaster and Ting described Emohing like this as a senior academic consultant. Silen arrived in front of the piles of parts and gave them a cursory look. First, he had to assemble the parts that had already been categorized into components, and there was a certain order to the assembly of these components. He had to choose which pile to assemble first and which pile to assemble next so that he could save more time during the assembly later on. With just a glance, Silen could see the best assembly order for these piles of parts. After choosing a pile, he began to assemble them. Emohing nodded in satisfaction. His disciple was still better than Silen. Not even the disciples of those old fellows had eyes as good as Silen's. Every knuckle, every muscle, and every joint had just the right amount of strength and precise timing. There were no unnecessary movements, but it was as if they were looking at a perfect work of art that they couldn't take their eyes off of. The feeling it gave off was that a part could be assembled with the slightest movement of a finger. It was incomparably easy. In reality, there were multiple movements happening at the same time in that instant. It was just that it was difficult for a normal person's vision to capture them. Every time Emohing watched Silen assemble, he would have the feeling that the golden point was right in front of him. It was a wonderful feeling. Silen was Emohing's hope, his hope to make contact with that legendary light. The monitor next to Emohing showed that his overall accuracy had reached 96% of the theoretical value. This was a very difficult feat to maintain, and even the great teachers of 7 lights might not necessarily be able to maintain such high overall accuracy for a long period of time. This was the difference between constitution and concentration. For a mechanical engineer, constitution was also an important factor. Every time Silen assembled, he felt that he should be able to assemble faster and have higher overall accuracy. But no matter how hard he tried, his overall accuracy could only stay at 96%. It was like a transparent barrier. He could see the other side, but he couldn't jump over it. Forget it. I can't force this kind of bottleneck either. If I accidentally shake my hand and my overall accuracy drops to 95%, then according to Emohing's standards, the entire part will have to be dismantled and reassembled. Dismantled and reassembled? Suddenly, Silen felt a blurry light flash through the darkness. Dismantle and reassemble, dismantle and reassemble. Emohing was watching with great interest at first. He was sighing at his disciple's powerful assembly talent and feeling pleased with himself on the inside. But in the next moment, he saw Silen suddenly stop what he was doing and stand there motionlessly, as if he was stunned. Chapter 53. Emohing did not disturb Silen. Silen must have thought of something. Sometimes, as long as a fleeting idea was grasped again, it would be very beneficial to personal progress. Such an opportunity could only be encountered. Of course, he hoped that Sillen was really inspired and not hungry again. If that was the case, Emoheng would not be able to resist throwing the cup at him. Sillen stayed there for a few minutes. Then, he put down the parts he was still holding and put aside the parts that were almost assembled. He took out the combination tool knife and began to dismantle the parts one by one. Until now, Sillen had only assembled and had not really dismantled any machinery. Therefore, when he was thinking, he always felt that something was missing. The so-called mastery was to have a more comprehensive and thorough understanding. Forward and backward, assembly and disassembly, they should all be more thoroughly understood and practiced. During the process of dismantling, Sillen could think from a different angle and analyze the machinery. It turned out that this was what he had been missing all along. Every time Sillen swept his eyes across an assembled machine, the only thing he would think about was how it was assembled. He never thought about how he should dismantle the machine, which direction he should start from, which part he should start from, and what order he should follow. Reverse deduction, reverse speculation, just like anti-tracking during hunting, should be on the same level as forward thinking, but it was often ignored. Divergent thinking and convergent thinking played an equally important role. Sillen's dismantling was not slow either. Almost all one could see was Sillen holding the tool knife and making a casual cut. The parts that were originally assembled as a solid whole were all separated. Every angle of force applied meant whether the dismantled parts were intact or deformed. The parts that Sillen dismantled fully explained the ability of the disassembler. On the parts, as long as the tool knife touched them, there would more or less be traces left. They might not be visible to the naked eye, but they definitely existed. Even the slightest change in a part would affect its precision. Therefore, during the process of dismantling, Sillen tried his best to reduce the number of times he used the knife. Therefore, there was a flash of the knife and several pieces were dismantled. Emoheng looked at Sillen's movements and nodded to himself. Sure enough, he was inspired and not hungry. After Sillen disassembled the parts that were almost fully assembled, he sat on the ground and tossed the parts up, caught them, tossed them up again, caught them again, tossed them up again. Then he put the parts aside and lay on the ground, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, the parts were scattered all over the place, then assembled one by one. After assembling, they separated, disassembled, assembled, disassembled, assembled. After thinking for a moment, Sillen crawled to his feet and began to assemble. Unlike before, Sillen would toss a few parts into the air when he was assembling, and when the parts fell to the assembly point, Sillen's hand would flash, and the parts would be firmly attached to it. At first glance, it looked as if the parts were being tossed into the air and then falling back down. If one looked closely, they would see that the parts were falling in a certain order. At the same time, during the assembly, Sillen made improvements in 3 areas. This was a shortcut discovered during the reverse process. A string of data appeared on the screen. The overall accuracy is 96% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 96% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 97% of the theoretical value. Emoheng was so excited that his face turned red. Genius, Sillen was definitely a genius. How long had it been since Sillen started formal education in mechanical assembly? The overall accuracy of the assembly was almost on par with a veteran like Emoheng, who had been immersed in this field for many years. He was also one of the best in the entire Galactic Alliance. In such a short period of time, the overall accuracy had improved from 95% to 97%. Then, how long would it take to reach 98%? Sillin was completely immersed in that world. He was assembling piles and piles of sorted parts into parts, and then assembling these parts into a complete body. Emoheng had been watching Sillin's assembly all this time and didn't look at the calculation screen again. Sillin's series of assembly could absolutely be used as an excellent teaching example. However, he didn't know how much other people could learn from it. It was a test of a person's eyesight and active thinking. Throughout the day, Sillin did not stop. Emoheng sat there and watched Sillin assemble. Neither of them ate lunch, nor did they have the intention to stop. When Sillin finished assembling the last part, he checked it and pressed the switch. The machine continued to change forms. The movements were smooth and there were no other noises or suspicious sounds. "There's no need to check. It's completely qualified," Emoheng said. He could not hide the excitement in his voice. Just as he was about to get up and take a good look, he realized, ouch, it's numb. Emoheng rubbed his legs. He had been in the same position for too long. Only now did he realize that his legs were numb. "Sillin, hurry up and help me up. Calm down a little. Sit down first." Sillin walked over and put 2 chairs side by side. He slowly placed Emoheng's legs on them and began to massage them. "Sigh, I'm so old and useless." Emoheng sighed. "I saw that you were quite imposing when you were scolding people yesterday. Those mentors couldn't even lift their heads." Yesterday, Sillin had coincidentally seen the scene of Emoheng scolding those mentors. That was called imposing and forceful. It felt like he was exuding the aura of a king. Those mentors who were usually arrogant in front of the students all had their heads almost buried in their crotches. Emoheng raised his head. "That's called temperament. It's innate temperament. Even if you still have the aura of a king, you can't forget to eat and sleep when you're working, can you? I heard that you often stay in the workshop, working for several hours at a time. This is called professionalism," Emoheng said with a face full of righteousness. Yes, professionalism. "Hey you brat." Emoheng reached out and pinched Sillin's face. "What's with that look of disdain? How would I dare? But even machinery needs maintenance, not to mention people. You better be careful. As the pillar of the research division, you have to last. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble if no one looks after me." "Tsk, you little brat," Emoheng scolded jokingly. After pinching Sillin's face hard, he waved his hand. "All right, it's not numb anymore. I'll take a look at the machine first." Emoheng walked around the machine that Sillin had already assembled, carefully examining the finished product in front of him. "Master, I want to take a vacation. I'm exhausted today." "Permission granted. Vacation." Emoheng's eyes were still shining as he walked around the machine, reaching out to check it from time to time. "Master, I want a raise." After coming to the research division, other than the fixed salary of an assistant, Sillin received extra income for every completed mission. This extra income was naturally paid by Emoheng. "All right, a raise." Emoheng agreed readily. 3 times the salary. "No problem, 3 times. And, hurry up and go eat." Seeing that Emoheng was still not ready to leave, Sillin ordered food and had the robot send it over. Of course, Emoheng paid for it. After eating with Moheng in the break room of the workshop and discussing his thoughts on assembly, Moheng told Sillin to just sleep there. In Emoheng's heart, the only people who stayed in Emoheng's break room were his son and grandson. Sillin was the third, which showed how important Sillin was to Emoheng. Moheng's workshop and office both had special break rooms, and because of Moheng's high position, the break room was fully equipped, so Sillin did not refuse. He took over Emoheng's break room, ate dinner, took a nice bath, and slept comfortably for 2 days. Sillin slept soundly, but little did he know that the sector championship platform was in an uproar. Chapter 54. After he was done sleeping, Silen got up and opened his communicator. There were more than 30 missed calls, and all of them were from the same person. Looking at the time, they were all called during Silen's usual rest hours. But this time, Silen had slept for 2 whole days, and his communicator was turned off. Looking at the number and the many reply as soon as you see this messages, Silen was puzzled. What the hell was this guy up to this time? However, Silen still dialed the number at the first opportunity. The call was swiftly connected without waiting, and Knight's haggard and aggrieved face appeared on the interface. Silen nearly spat out a mouthful of water he was drinking. Just how wronged must he be to make Knight, a man who usually acted like he was number one in the world, say something like this? What now? I'm being bullied. Bullshit, who would dare bully you? Who in the entire 7 lights could bully you? Get to the point. After Knight's explanation, Silen finally understood why this guy had called more than 30 times. Knight ran into his old friend Stantine of the 2nd Military Academy when he was doing warm-up training on the Sector Championships platform. However, Stantine and another student of the 2nd Military Academy were defeated by the Visby brothers of the 4th Military Academy during warm-up training, and it stirred up Knight's fighting spirit. However, Knight really couldn't find anyone he liked to team up with in 7 lights because the Visby brothers only participated in the less popular double matches and not the popular single matches. The first person Knight thought of was Silen, but Silen's communicator was turned off, and he didn't reply to his messages either. He tried looking for Ci Jincheng and Lung, but neither of them were free. Surd and Hard? Their abilities were still lacking. Pride? No way. Knight felt that if Pride went, he might not be able to stop himself from fighting all 3 of them at once. It was better to go with Silen. And so, the communicator was turned off after the first call. The second call was turned off, and the third call was still turned off. Knight had endured from yesterday until today, and his face was haggard. He wanted to go to the research division several times, but if he did, Mo Hung would probably leave both of them there. If that was the case, then he really wouldn't have any chance at all. The sector championship was about to officially begin, and the registration for some of the smaller competitions ahead of it was the first to open. There were 2 days, yesterday and today, so it was no wonder that Knight was in such a hurry. Silen was amused by Knight's aggrieved look. Alright, I just got a few days off. I'll go with you to meet the twins. Knight's eyes lit up when he heard Silen's words. The haggard look on his face disappeared, as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Brother, you'd better come back soon. The registration ends tonight. I'm going to send the duel invitation right now. Beep. Silen was speechless as he stared at the disconnected communicator. Just how thirsty was this guy? After stretching, washing up and tidying up, Silen walked out of Mo Heng's workshop. After sleeping for 2 days, he was hungry. Looking for food was his top priority. As he walked to the research division's cafeteria, a student who did not look well greeted Silen weakly. What's wrong, Singh? You don't look too good, Silen said. Singh was about the same age as Silen. He was a specially recruited first-year student, but he basically did not go to class. He spent most of his time in the research division working on project. Don't mention it. Poor bowel movement. I bring shit to work. Singh had always felt that working in the research division was just like going to work. He had to clock in, work on projects, and get paid. He was like an office worker. Singh, this is a cafeteria. Can't you be a little more refined? Someone beside him spat out his orange juice and glared at Singh. Sorry, I have to be considerate to someone with periodic constipation. Singh made an apologetic gesture and left the cafeteria. Silen smiled and shook his head. This guy was famous for his periodic constipation. After looking for food, Silen returned to his workshop to pack up and get ready to return to the dormitory. As he was packing, Ling Long came over. After entering, Ling Long asked in a small voice, There's no one else here, right? No, the surveillance wasn't turned on either. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take over a man? After eating and sleeping, Sillin was in a much better mood and joked around more. Ling Long curled her lips. After closing the door, she crossed her arms and looked at Sillin with a sneaky smile. How would I dare to take over Shadow X, Sillin was surprised. Ling Long's words were very certain. There was not even a hint of speculation in them. How did she know? The information protection measures on the platform were done by him personally. Ling Long looked straight at Sillin. Whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I can always recognize you at first glance. Sillin smiled when he heard this. Levine's Colors, Chapter 7, The Butterfly and the Dragonfly. You read Levine's books too? Ling Long's eyes shone, as if she had finally found a friend after traveling thousands of mountains and rivers. Very few people read Levine's fantasy fairy tales with a more artistic style. I didn't expect you to read them too, and remember them so clearly. Sillin didn't say anything. Chapter 7 of Levine's Colors was about a butterfly and a dragonfly. There was a very large tree by the stream. Its thick branches stretched across the stream. A very disgusting caterpillar was lying there eating leaf. The branch was very close to the water, and after eating its fill, it climbed up the leaf and looked at the water below on a whim. Through the reflection of the water, it saw an ugly and ferocious-looking insect below the water, and that insect also saw it. For a period of time, the caterpillar ran over every day, and every day, the insect under the water would wait for it at the same place below the water. Days passed, and the caterpillar was about to turn into a cocoon. That day, it ran to the same place and glanced at the insect under the water, then climbed to a place on the tree where its companions were turning into cocoons. The day after the caterpillar left, the insect under the water climbed out and attached itself to a plant that was exposed above the water. Many of its kind also climbed out along the water plants, and their bodies began to change. When the caterpillar broke out of the cocoon and flew out as a butterfly, it immediately returned to the original place, but there was no sign of the insect under the water. It was very dejected, and flew with its companions to a flower field not far from where it was. There were colorful flowers everywhere, and all sorts of butterflies, dragonflies, bees, and so on. It was very lively. The butterfly flew, and when it passed by a patch of irises, its gaze fell on a purple iris. There was a dragonfly there, flapping its wings, and its thin wings reflected a metallic glow under the sunlight. At the end of The Butterfly and the Dragonfly, Levine wrote a paragraph as usual. One of the lines was, "Whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I will always be able to recognize you at first glance." Do you believe Levine's words? Exquisite asked. I don't know, Sillin answered. But Hannah believed that she liked this fairy tale very much, and that was why Sillin remembered it. Exquisite glanced at Sillin. You don't believe it? Jumping onto the table at the side, Exquisite shook her legs like a child. There are many unreasonable things in fairy tales, but I agree with Levine's words. Turning around, Exquisite looked at Sillin seriously. I knew it was you the moment I saw Shadow X. Sillin's back was sweating. Was this a confession? Fortunately, Exquisite did not dwell on this. She took out the microcomputer from her bag, turned it on, logged into the Sector Championship platform, and pulled up the Sector Championship forum. Look, Shadow X, you're famous. Chapter 55. Sillin rarely fought on the Sector Championships platform to begin with, fighting only once a day. This was already enough to make a lot of people want to throw a tantrum, and this time, Shadow X disappeared for 3 days in a row without accepting a single challenge. Some people could not help but come out to criticize him. On the Sector Championship forums, a lot of people had posted their challenge requests right away, openly challenging Shadow X. Most of these people were from the military academies, and most of them were A-rank genotype. The challengers were all A-rank geniuses from military academies. A military academy's A-rank genotype actually dared to openly challenge a B-rank genotype student of a Sector B academy? Moreover, all 4 military academies were like this, completely unafraid of being laughed at by others. Everyone could not help but wonder just what kind of divine being Shadow X was that he could actually force those military academy students who usually looked down on the other sectors into such a state. Shadow X had only appeared for 3 days, and these 3 days were not long at all. However, that generic robot appearance of his had already become a major characteristic, and at the same time, it also caused a lot of people to feel helpless. There was information about Shadow X on the forums. It was a generic robot image and a simple and monotonous list of information. Male, 7 lights, rank B genotype, 3 wins and 0 losses. That was all. It was so simple that it was mysterious. After Shadow X's first battle against Tusk, the number of people following him exceeded 10,000. After his third battle, his name became famous throughout the entire Sector Championship platform, and the number of people challenging him had reached 5-digit. Most of them were military academy students of Sector C. The number of people following him had reached 6 digits and was growing rapidly towards 7-digit. This was an unprecedented situation. Since Shadow X had not logged onto the Sector Championships platform for 3 days, someone jumped out to accuse Shadow X of acting like a big shot. Putting on airs? If you have the guts, come and play with me. The people of 7 Lights immediately responded. The people who used to accuse Shadow X of corrupting the school's reputation had also changed their stance. Right now, Shadow X was 7 Lights' treasure. There were also those who said that Shadow X was deliberately avoiding the battle, but this voice did not last long before it was scolded down by the other armies, especially those few people in the military academies whose words carried a lot of weight. They believed that Shadow X had something to do and had not logged into the Sector Championships platform for the time being. There were people from 7 Lights who had specifically made a list of 7 Lights first-year students who were stronger than the rest and whose genotype was at rank B, and Silen's name was among them. It was just that he had been eliminated in the first round of screening. A person who had just recovered from a serious illness could challenge someone from a military academy right after being discharged from the hospital? No one would believe it. Moreover, some of the trainees from the training division said that Silen's marksmanship was not bad, but in terms of individual combat ability, they did not know. After all, he was ranked last among the 5 trainees who participated in the mission. However, after many rounds of screening, they could not find a single person who could possibly be Shadow X. One of the threads speculated that perhaps Shadow X was not a freshman at all. There was no information about his year in his information at all, so he could not be identified as a freshman just because it was his first time registering on the Sector Championships platform. It should be known that there were plenty of amazing people who had missed out on the Sector Championship due to certain missions during their freshman years. As soon as this post was posted, many people responded to it. In short, there were all kinds of opinions. Therefore, when Silen looked at the Sector Championship forum page that Exquisite had opened, he was also stunned. He had not expected that just 3 days of contact with the Sector Championship platform would result in such an effect. That's why I said, Shadow X, you're famous now. Exquisite looked at Silen. What do you plan to do? Let's talk about it later. Anyway, I have a few days off. I'll log in today and check out the situation. I don't know how many challenge requests you've received, but the Sector Championship is about to officially begin. Are you going to participate in the minor tournaments before this? Minor tournaments referred to those single or two-man tournaments, while major tournaments referred to those that were conducted by teams. Regardless of whether it was a minor tournament or a major tournament, it had nothing to do with the popularity of the tournament. For example, the single combat tournament was more popular, and the audience would always be packed to the brim. The two-man tournaments, on the other hand, were a little colder, and the chances of stars appearing were not as high as the single combat tournament. You want to know? Scylla stood up and packed his backpack. Let's wait until tomorrow. Exquisite wrinkled her nose in dissatisfaction and snorted softly. Stingy. She put away her microcomputer and even made a face at Scylla before she left. After Exquisite left Scylla's workshop and walked out of the Institute of Mechanical Engineering, she saw someone standing in the hallway not too far away. She was still dressed in the same refreshing attire as before. It was not flirtatious, but it gave off a very dazzling feeling. Teresa did not turn around to look at Exquisite. She was still looking at the distant scenery with a smile on her lips. When Exquisite saw Teresa, there was none of the playfulness she had in Scylla's workshop just now. Her deep amber eyes were filled with coldness, so coldness that Teresa could clearly feel her killing intent. You know, there's someone else in Scylla's heart. Even so, it won't be you, Teresa. Exquisite had always called Teresa by her name. Teresa did not mind either. She only smiled lightly as she felt the breeze blowing over. Teresa, I don't care what kind of deal you have with Scylla. If anything happens to Scylla, I won't let your galwa get away with it. With just you? Or your background? Teresa played with her hair that was blown up by the wind. It seemed that she did not take Exquisite's words to heart at all. Exquisite looked at Teresa and suddenly smiled mockingly. Teresa, you always think you're very smart. She then left without looking back. On the same day, when Scylla returned to the dormitory, Knight was still the only one there. Seeing that Scylla had returned, Knight no longer cared about the matters on the Sector Championship platform. He urged Scylla to log into the Sector Championship platform and sign up. When Scylla logged in, Knight ran back to his bedroom and brought his microcomputer over. Registration required 2 people to enter their information at the same time. For convenience's sake, Knight directly brought his own equipment over. However, when Knight saw the screen that popped up on Scylla's microcomputer, his mouth dropped wide open. On the screen in front of Scylla, an unusually familiar-looking generic robot was swaying back and forth. The name displayed was Shadow X. Scylla, what? F***CKU. Knight rushed over and strangled Scylla's neck. I didn't expect you to be the mysterious generic Shadow X that spread all over the Sector Championship platform, the one who single-handedly provoked the war between 4 military academies. How dare you hide it from us for so long? Sigh, it's not like you asked me. Hurry up and sign up. Registration is more important. That's right, I'll let you go today. Next time I'll let you know the consequences of lying to us. You're a great man, please forgive me. I'll treat you to crabs next time. Don't give me that, kid. I'm telling you, fuck, I want to eat fresh, live, and unexperimented crabs. As expected of a glutton. Scylla only took a glance at the unread numbers in his message box and inbox before he stopped looking at them. That number, it was a lot. Although he had logged into the Sector Championship platform, he was in stealth mode. He could neither fight nor train. Of course, it was still possible to sign up. Knight's ID was simply Knight. Knight was quite famous on the Sector Championship platform, and many people in the military academies knew him. Moreover, Knight was ranked first among this batch of 7 Light's new students in terms of individual combat strength. Of course, he received a lot of attention. However, when Knight's and Shadow X's names appeared in the participant list of the double combat tournament, the entire Sector Championship platform boiled over. Just how big of a wave would this duo cause? Chapter 56. The Sector Championship was very open, fair, and free. Everyone who signed up would be recorded and made public, and anyone who logged onto the Sector Championship's platform would be able to look it up. This way, if they saw someone they wanted to challenge, they could also sign up and participate. In the past, the single combat tournament was the most popular of all small-scale competitions. It was very easy to stir up the students' blood. Everyone hoped that they could become a domineering figure who could single-handedly defeat tens of thousands of opponents. With such glory and standing in the limelight, who would be willing to share it with another person? But this term was different. When the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the participant list, the entire sector championship platform's situation began to change. The single and double combat competitions were held at almost the same time. Students would usually only participate in one of them. At the same time, it was also a more comprehensive assessment of each school's combat strength. Due to the sudden discovery of the duo's name on the list of participants, many students who had already signed up for the single combat competition also signed up for the double combat competition. As a result, the number of people signing up for the double combat competition exceeded the number of people signing up for the single combat competition. Fortunately, it was a virtual platform. It could provide multiple match points to start at the same time, so it would not cause a situation where too many people could not participate. There was no upper limit to the number of participants in the small-scale competition. This was also a major feature of the Sector Championships platform. Inside the 3rd Military Academy's gravity training room, Faradin was fighting against someone. The blurry shadows of fists and the banging sounds of fists and kicks clashing against each other rang out incessantly. It was obvious that Faradin was slightly inferior to the opponent, and he was having a bit of a hard time dealing with the fists that were coming his way. To be able to maintain such a high speed in such a gravitational field, it had to be said that the two of them were quite outstanding. Bang! Faradin took a few steps back, swung his arms that blocked the kick, and said with some annoyance, "I missed another move." "It's fine. You're already very outstanding. No one in the first years can block so many of my moves." After fighting for such a long time, Faradin's opponent actually didn't sweat much, and his slightly hurried breathing soon calmed down. Faradin looked at the other party, and said for the umpteenth time, "Boss Boar, I really want to see your duel with Shadow X. It must be very exciting." Standing not too far away, Boar relaxed his muscles and shook his head. "Shadow X is too mysterious. Many of the people I know have sent him war invitations, but none of them have responded. Who knows what kind of god he is? But I suggest you meet Nate when the time comes." "Seven Lights Knight? He seems to be quite famous. I heard from my dorm that he's also a freshman." Ever since he lost to Shadow X, Faradin hadn't paid much attention to anyone else. He usually only learned about them from others. Knight could have come to the military academy, but somehow he ended up at Sector B. However, his strength cannot be underestimated. "Do you know Nate's full name?" Faradin shook his head. "Knight's full name is Fiegler Knight." "Thunderstorm Fiegler?" Faradin was immediately interested. "That kid hasn't used Thunderstorm Punch since he entered the Sector Championships platform." Faradin rubbed his fists and feet. "He will definitely meet him when the time comes. He should be participating in the single combat tournament, right? It should be DDD." The emergency pager on the wall of the training room rang. Communicators were not allowed in the gravity training field, so both of them had their communicators turned off. If there was an emergency, they would use the special pager on the wall to transfer the call. Boar walked to the side, removed the gravity field, and connected the pager. "What happened?" "Boss Boar, there's big news on the Sector Championship platform. Knight and Shadow X have teamed up and signed up for the double combat tournament." Faradin, who was putting on his jacket, pricked his ears and lost control of his strength, tearing his jacket into 2 pieces. Faradin didn't care about his jacket either, and simply tossed the 2 pieces to the side before running to Boar's side like a wisp of smoke. His ears were pricked up, afraid that he would miss a single word. When the other was done, Faradin was so excited that he couldn't wait to run back and sign up for the double combat tournament immediately. After the communication was cut off, Boar was silent for a moment before asking Faradin, "Is Shadow X really that strong?" Faradin's expression immediately turned incredibly serious. "He's very strong. I don't know how strong he really is, because I feel that he didn't use his full strength at all when he fought me. Also, I felt like I was being led by the nose from the beginning to the end. That last strike, just one strike alone, could have killed me at my peak." After hearing Faradin's words, Boar laughed out loud. "That's good. Faradin, let's go meet Shadow X and Thunderstorm Knight." "Boss Boar, you're going too? Didn't the instructor say that you're going to fight Kamos for the championship of the single combat tournament this year?" Although Faradin was very tempted by Boar's suggestion, since Boar was the runner-up of last year's single combat tournament and his strength was there for all to see, and he had also gotten familiar with Boar's sparring sessions over the past half a year. Forming a pair to fight in the double combat tournament was definitely possible, but the instructor's words were in front of him, and he couldn't go back on his word. The instructor also said, "Isn't the purpose of a combat platform to fight to your heart's content? What's the point of having so many false reputations?" Faradin pressed his fingers together and muttered inwardly, "The instructor's *T of false reputations are meant for us inside the 3rd Military Academy, but the false reputations outside the 3rd Military Academy are very important to them because those are related to their welfare. Otherwise, they'd punish us to run around the field naked." Not long after the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the double combat tournament name list, the 3rd Military Academy's Boar and Faradin duo brought everyone's attention to the double combat tournament once more. Half an hour later, at almost the same time, the 2nd Military Academy's Ryan and Bon duo, as well as the 1st Military Academy's Kamos and Feng Haichao duo, set off the third climax of this term's double combat tournament. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this time's double combat tournament was filled with glittering stars. Last term's double combat tournament champions, the Visby brothers, Thunderstorm Knight and the much-anticipated Shadow X. Last term's second place in the single combat tournament, Boar and the 2nd Military Academy's rising seed Faradin. Last term's 4th place Ryan and Bon, who was rumored to be stronger than Ryan but had missed last year's tournament due to a mission. Last term's single combat tournament champion Kamos and Feng Haichao, who was rumored to also have missed last year's tournament due to a mission but was no weaker than Kamos. Looking at it this way, other than the 4th Military Academies, Valente, who shared 2nd place with Boar in last year's single combat tournament, 3 of the top 4 contestants of last year's single combat tournament had appeared on the double combat tournament's name list. The Sector Championships platform went completely crazy. Since the top few of Sector C's 4 military academies were participating in the double combat tournament, the other academies naturally couldn't be left behind. Although from a strategic point of view, the best way would be to avoid a tournament where experts gathered and participate in another tournament. From a personal perspective, this time's double combat tournament held too much significance. They hadn't seen such a scene for many years, or at least in all the years that they knew of, there had never been a double combat tournament that could attract the top geniuses from all over the world. But this time was different. If they missed it, who knew how many years they would have to wait to encounter such a situation again? If they missed it, they would regret it. Since they didn't want to regret it, of course they had to sign up. Because of the matter of signing up for the double combat tournament, the faces of every academy's higher-ups darkened. They couldn't stop the students from signing up even if they wanted to. Spittle flew everywhere, and using both carrot and stick, these little fellows still eagerly signed up. It truly infuriated the higher-ups of the academies. The night of the registration deadline was a crazy night. Whether it was the electronic publication responsible for reporting or the students who didn't sign up due to their limited strength, everyone was so excited that they couldn't sleep well for the entire night. On the other side, Sillin, who was about to sleep and rest, and Knight, who was still fighting on the sector championship platform, were simultaneously pulled back to their senses by a fatal series of calls. Sillin pressed the accept button. "Where's Soulseeker? You could have just dialed our numbers, but why the hell are you dialing all 5 communicators installed in the dormitory at the same time? Are you calling the police?" Silent night, just you wait for me without any sense of loyalty. I'll return to the dormitory immediately. Don't fall asleep, I'll drag you out even if you fall asleep. Lung roared loudly from the other side of the communicator.